around 8:30 or so, we may take a bit of a break for council and for members of the gallery to take a break for a few moments, then come back to consider the rest of the delegations. So we've moved the prayer. Now there's some movement with the agenda.
Your Worship, I'll move the agenda with the additions from the clerk's office. We had some last-minute folks that wanted to speak, and so they've been included in that.
Thank you. A seconder for that, please.
I'll second that.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So we'll get right down to it. The first report is from Colin Stewart. Good evening, Mr. Stewart. If you just identify yourself, who you represent, and you have 10 minutes for your presentation, as I just mentioned.
Sure. Good evening, Your Worship, members of City Council and City Administration. My name is Colin Stewart, and I represent myself as a tax-paying citizen of Regina. I have been following with interest progress towards construction of a new wastewater treatment plant over the past few months. I've been frustrated by misleading information and scare tactics provided by Regina Water Watch. I have been encouraged to hear that the clerk's office has done due diligence with the petition. I wish I could say that we all agree a new sewage treatment plant is required. Unfortunately, there is a small minority of people who claim we really don't need it and should not be spending money to build it. Interestingly enough, they have also signed the petition that is before you this evening. For their benefit, I would like to share with you some reasons that I believe we need the new plant. First and foremost, our current plant is nearing end of life. We all know this. Many of us were frustrated last summer with the foul odor hanging over Regina. Even Mayor Fiacco, who lives in the path of this odor, was upset by it. Many of us, because of this odor, spent last summer indoors with our windows closed. While the problem was solved in the fall, I'm left wondering what will break down next. The plant will obviously need significant and costly maintenance in the very near future. The longer we delay building a new plant, the more we will have to spend on repairs and maintenance to the old plant. In a city where many people are questioning whether money is being spent wisely, and many of those have signed the petition, further delays cause me confusion. Our current plant is releasing pollution, particularly nitrogen, into downstream waterways. One of those, Pasqua Lake, has been in the news recently due to high levels of blue-green algae caused by nitrogen released from our sewage treatment plant. According to local media, Pasqua Lake contains more pollution than the Great Lakes did when they were cleaned up nearly 30 years ago. Delays will also cost money. Over a 4-year delay, the projected costs nearly doubled. How much more will the cost increase as we delay construction further? Some of those costs include the cost of maintaining our current plant, increased construction costs, increased costs of cleanup of downstream waterways, and the cost of reduced property values downstream. I'm sure you're wondering why I am talking about delays when all we are really dealing with is the petition. Well, this petition has already delayed construction by 3 months, and if it is accepted and a referendum held, will delay the process a further 6 months. The question is this petition valid? Does it have enough signatures? The province seems to think that the threshold being based upon the 2011 census is sufficient, even though our population has grown by 10% since then, and health card numbers could give a more accurate representation of the true population of Regina. The dictionary does indeed define date as including the year. This is the first and most commonly accepted definition of date. Since the Cities Act does not stipulate that the year must be included, or for that matter that it need not be included, I submit that removing signatures that do not include the year only serves to remove questions regarding validity and is a wise move. As for phoning people to verify their signatures, the Cities Act does allow for verification of a sample of signatures. The fact that the story revealing that these phone calls were being made was commented on by a reader that he had not actually signed the petition raises questions in my mind. Are all of these signatures really valid? Should the ones who cannot be verified by telephone be removed? I consider doing so to be insurance against invalid signatures. You may also be wondering whether I signed the petition. The answer is simply no. If my name is on it, and I am wondering if it is, I did not sign it.
Order, please. No, please, no comments from the gallery. Thank you.
I am in full support of using a P3 to construct the new plant. We are not privatizing the plant as some say we are. No jobs will be lost as some claim will be. Workers will have the same, if not better, qualifications as they do today. Effluent quality will not be negatively affected. It should be common knowledge that safeguards have been put in place to protect against these concerns raised by the petition organizers. Thank you. I now welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart, for your presentation. Are the members of council have any questions? There are none. Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery. And the next delegation is Maureen McKenzie. Ms. McKenzie, if you could identify yourself, who you represent, and you as well have 10 minutes for your presentation.
Mayor Fougere, councillors, and citizens. I am deeply disappointed by the unprecedented encroachment on the democratic rights of citizens by the City of Regina officials when dealing with the wastewater treatment plant petition. Signatures not including the date, the year, were disallowed when the petition signatures were only collected in the 90-day period running from March 22nd to June 20th, 2013, as is clearly stated in the declaration handed in to the city clerk with the petition signatures. I also object to the phone messages requiring a response within 3 days if one didn't want one's signature to be removed from the petition. These calls occurred during the summer when many people are not home and might not be checking their messages, and many folks are also on vacation. And what about all the folks with cell phones? Are they getting called? Or is it only landline users who are being so contacted? Furthermore, I am shocked that City Clerk asked the province to raise the number of signatures required to force a referendum just days before the petition was due to be handed into City Hall. What would you think if the coach of the Calgary Stampeders asked the CFL to move the goalposts just before the Rough Riders were about to score a touchdown?
Order, please. Order, please. I'd ask members of the gallery to please respect the decorum of council. Please, thank you very much.
24,232 Regina citizens signed the petition. More people than voted for Mayor Fougere in the last election. Some of them signed because
Order, please.
they have grave concerns about council's decision to use the P3 model for our wastewater treatment plant. Others signed because they think citizens in this city should have a say in this issue. In their view, too many decisions are being made in this city without consulting the electorate and without enough information being given to us. An apology is in order to those 24,232 citizens who signed the petition, and the handling of it by city officials was both mean-spirited and high-handed. Thank you.
I'm going to please ask members of the gallery to please, you'll have your chance to speak as a delegation, but please respect the rules within this chamber. It's not hard to do. I know you have feelings about this very strong. We all do. But please respect the decorum of the chamber. Thank you. The next delegation is Christina, I believe it's Mecklenburg. I may be wrong on that, but I'll be corrected. If you identify yourself and who you represent, you as well have 10 minutes for your presentation.
My name is Christina Mickelborough. I represent myself. What I have here is actually an email that I sent to the mayor, but I never heard back from him. Mayor and Council, I'm addressing you about the recent rejection of the overwhelmingly supported P3 petition. I signed the petition, but honestly, the matter is no longer about Regina's wastewater system. It is about democracy. Mayor and Council has maintained that the city clerk who rejected the petition is completely independent. If this is the case, then it is now your job to greenlight the referendum. If you do not, I can only urge your immediate resignation because of your disrespect for the citizens of Regina and democracy. What is happening here is criminal. You have tried multiple times to get in the way of this petition. I'm referring to your appeal to the provincial government to change the number of signatures required. Why are you so scared of engaged citizens? It's your job to represent the citizens of Regina. It doesn't matter an iota if all of City Council agrees that P3 is the best solution and that the sky is blue. If the citizens of Regina say we don't want P3 and the sky is pink, you have to represent that. It almost brings me to tears how underhanded and undemocratic this is. Is this what you want your legacy to be? And this undemocratic behavior is the gateway to worse things. Will our votes count during the next election? Or will we just be allowed to vote and then the city clerk will pick the mayor?
Order, please.
Regina is now the laughingstock of the rest of Canada. And this business about the date is nonsense. Mayor and Council, I ask you, if I tell you today is July 22nd, are you suddenly confused about what year it is? This is the most pathetic display of corruption our city has witnessed. Are you afraid of time travel? You must know in your heart of hearts that this is wrong. I guarantee you that the citizens of Regina will not stand for being so completely disrespected in such a fashion. Mayor and Council, this is your chance to do the right thing. Validate the petition, hold the referendum as stated in the petition, and make the results binding. Thank you for coming to your senses.
I guess this means you don't want to answer any questions. Are there questions of the delegation? Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for your presentation. Just a quick question. I just want to set the democratic bit aside for a second. You signed the petition. I know that's a silly question, but I imagine you did.
Yes, I did.
Could you just tell me in a nutshell what that was about, just for you, what the petition is, what's sort of the key issue in the petition for you?
The key issue of the petition is that we don't want to see our wastewater system as a result of a P3. I heard someone earlier say that it's that we don't believe that the wastewater system needs replacing. That's not what the petition is about. It's about keeping it public, not private.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? We'll return to the gallery. The next delegation is Chad Novak. So Novak, you know the rules of engagement. If you just state your name, who you represent, you have 10 minutes for your presentation as well, and maybe questions afterwards.
Thank you very much. Good evening, members of City Council, City Administration, Regina taxpayers, and Regina media. My name is Chad Novak, and I'm here representing myself, a taxpaying citizen of the City of Regina. I'm here this evening to address the issue of democracy. Furthermore, to the fact that the P3 wastewater treatment petition had been submitted with 24,361 signatures. Even after the Regina Water Watch folks had gone through to remove pages of signatures based on the fact that they felt only one or two signatures may be deemed invalid or incomplete. To me, they went above and beyond the call of duty, not only in gathering thousands more signatures than are required by our extremely tight provincial legislation, but also by removing entire pages of valid signatures, even if it was just for one signature that they felt would be deemed invalid. Not to mention the months of hard work and dedication that these volunteers, on their own accord, to abide by the severely outdated protocol of requiring handwritten petitions to be completed, even though we are in a day and age where technology rules our worlds and online petitions are now the norm. I can empathize with their plight, as I was involved with the stadium petition, and I can assure you that is no easy task. Tonight, I am sure you will be hearing from many individuals, 22 in fact, on this subject, so I will try to avoid duplication of any subjects that I am sure others will touch on. First of all, I would like to make notice that, in my opinion, the City of Regina has set many precedents in recent years, demonstrating that they are not willing to abide by democracy, that we understand it to be, and continue to ignore the will of taxpayers, regardless of how valid their case is made. I could get into specifics, but I'd probably be called out of order, so I will simply list them here. And if you choose, you can ask me for further clarification afterwards. These include the Regina Revitalization Initiative, City Square Plaza, curbside recycling, Regina Affordable Housing Crisis, rooming housing fines and jail time, Regina housing issues, approval of condo conversions and demolition of affordable housing complexes when the vacancy rate was below 3%, applying for and approving requests to allow excessive record debt levels for wants instead of our true needs, needless land annexation, water rates skyrocketing for city residents, increased water rates and unreasonable surcharges for quote-unquote extra-municipal developments, deplorable road conditions, ongoing construction projects that last 2 to 3 times longer than expected, Regina transit shortfalls, civic pension shortfall, potential for bankruptcy, design Regina consultations, poor planning and foresight, and the list continues. These are just a few of the reasons I feel that I have been forced to pursue legal action against the City of Regina, including, at minimum, the city's executive leadership team. Notice of this pending action has been provided to you in May of this year. Now, speaking specifically to subverting democracy in regards to the P3 wastewater treatment plant petition, it should be without question that I am opposed to the finding of the City Clerk's office for many reasons. First and foremost, the fact that 2,834 signatures were deemed invalid simply because they didn't include the year 2013. To me, this is the most ridiculous and disgusting display of abuse of power that I have been witness to from the City of Regina's council or administration in recent memory. To go to the extent of pleading ignorance of what date the signatories intended by their signature, simply because they allegedly didn't include the year, is a kick in the teeth to those nearly 3,000 tax-paying citizens that signed in good faith that the City of Regina would take their intentions seriously. Surely common sense must come into play in this situation, as it is pretty obvious. It would be physically impossible for anyone to sign this petition in any other year other than 2013, given the content wasn't even available to the general public until 2013. During the course of the validation process, it was discovered that the City Clerk's office had actually been calling people to verify the exact information that is already contained in the petition. This step is completely unnecessary, as in the Cities Act, as per paragraph 107, section 107, subsection 1, paragraph B, it clearly states that, quote unquote, by signing the petition, the petitioner is attesting to the fact that he or she is an elector of the city and has not signed the petition before. Thus, to call anyone that has signed the petition is, in my opinion, not required and possibly even a violation of section 107 of the Cities Act. Based on the legislation, the simple act of signing the petition should be deemed enough evidence by the City Clerk's office that they meet all requirements. All the clerk's office should be allowed to do, if they choose to ignore subsection 108.3, is call to verify people that actually signed the petition, yes or no. That's it. Only if they have a legal concern should they be applying to the courts to challenge if a signatory is valid. Furthermore, to verify signatures as per subsection 108.3 and 108.4 of the Cities Act, verification can only be done by either verifying every single signature on the petition or using a random sample of signatures to determine the sufficiency, not both. Since it would appear that the City Clerk's office used both subsection 108.3 and subsection 108.4, they are in clear violation of the Cities Act. Also, it should be noted that an address is deemed, quote-unquote complete by including the street address only. No city or postal code is required, or alternatively, a post office box address. Jim Nickel has stated to me, and I have that conversation recorded, thankfully, that this was one of the main reasons the clerk's office felt the need to call people to confirm that their street address was actually in Regina. Yeah, believe it or not. Again, this is an unnecessary step based on the petitioner's attestation as per Section 107. Now, finally tonight, if you do choose to accept the city clerk's recommendation and deny taxpayers to have their say, I would like to personally call, and I might clarify now that there's been some new information, regardless of whether you go with a referendum or not. I don't care anymore. I would like to call for the resignation of the entire City of Regina executive leadership team, the City of Regina legal team, and the City of Regina City Clerk's office. This is...
Order, please. I'd ask you not to participate in the discussion by the delegation, please. Thank you.
This is due to their continued displays of incompetence in their given roles. Thank you for your time, and I will now open the floor to any questions that you may have.
Any questions of the delegation?
Mr. Hanks, any questions?
Order, please, Mr. Novak.
You know I love it.
You can actually sit down now. There's no questions.
All right, thanks, sir.
You're dismissed. Next delegation is Devin Anderson. If you could identify yourself, who you represent. You have 10 minutes for your presentation, and we may have questions afterwards.
Good evening. I represent myself, and my name is Devin Anderson. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to the City Council for providing me with the opportunity to participate in the democratic process for the City of Regina. And thanks also to the City Clerk for the processes she followed leading up to the deadline for the petition being submitted and for her report. Along with many others, it has inspired me to read portions of the City Act for the first time. This is also my first presentation to City Council. I share the concerns raised by many about the methodology used by the City Clerk to reach the conclusions in her report. Although not a lawyer, it seems quite clear to me that Section 108 of the Act indicates an either-or method of arriving at the final count, not both. Either the clerk excludes persons who do not meet specific criteria, such as date, signature, address, lack of witness, or the clerk may use a random sampling method. It certainly does not seem to me that both are acceptable. But then I only really became involved in this process after I heard that the city clerk had asked the government to agree to allow the city to use numbers based on health cards rather than based on the last census numbers. I wondered then, and I wonder even more so now, why it's so important to not have a referendum. I urge the Council to remember that as elected officials, you are all accountable to all of us, the citizens of this city, not just to those citizens who agree with you. Since the Council vote was unanimous to go ahead with the P3 process, I assume that you all think it was a good idea and the right decision to make. If so, why be so reluctant to give us the reasons in an open forum and as a referendum? Go ahead with the referendum using the same question that was on the petition, and that will provide you with the opportunity to tell us why it's the best route to go. Be open and accountable to us. Give us information as to why this is needed. I encourage you to take the high road and have the referendum, again, using the original question from the petition. You can make that call in spite of the clerk's report. Many people who signed this petition likely also voted for you. To ignore the desire of 24,000 engaged citizens is not a wise move. It just makes 24,000 citizens wonder what is being hidden. And by the way, just to clarify, I'm not a city employee, a CUPE member, nor a CUPE employee. I'm just a concerned Regina taxpayer with a long memory, a lot of friends, and I always vote. Any questions?
Thank you for your, I'm going to ask the delegation or the audience to please not engage in the discussion. You have your say in a moment. Any questions of the delegation? Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for your presentation, Ms. Anderson. Same question for you. If we can just set the democratic piece aside for a second. As someone who signed the petition, could you just tell me in a nutshell what the petition was about for you?
Certainly, and I certainly understand the need for the wastewater treatment plant. I did not sign it to try and say that we shouldn't have a new plant. What I signed it for is because I want some more information. There's all sorts of information out there as to whether this is really going to cost me more as a taxpayer in the long run, and also who's going to control this for 30 years. I want the opportunity to get some information, to hear the story, and to hear the facts from a variety of sources. That's what I want.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Other questions?
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening. I note that you read the Cities Act. Can I ask if you looked or followed the discussion that was on the floor of Council when we were considering a method to build the P3? Did you follow that discussion, and did you read the reports?
I did not. I have only just read the Cities Act just in the last day. And I've only read the part that pertains to how you count the number of petitioners.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dowell. If there's no other questions, you can return to the gallery, and we'll move on to our next delegation, Jim Elliott. Mr. Elliott, if you could identify yourself, who you represent, and you have 10 minutes for your presentation as well.
Good evening, and my name is Jim Elliott. I'm the chairperson of the Regina chapter of Council of Canadians. Our organization was involved in the forming of Regina Water Watch, and we provided educational information around the P3 option for the wastewater treatment plant to the citizens of Regina. I also signed the petition. What have we heard? We've heard that the federal Conservative government will only give money to municipalities who support the P3 model. We've heard the Federation of Canadian Municipalities call to have the support for infrastructure untethered so that the people of the country can have their choice respected and supported. We've heard from this council that we should trust their statements that this project will save the taxpayers of the city tens of millions of dollars over the 30-year contract. Yet this council will not support a transparent discussion of their assertions by allowing the numbers to speak for themselves and be challenged on their assumptions. The taxpayers have heard of the problems with other P3 projects in Canada and abroad and don't want to be burdened with the same problems or go down that road, leaving future generations with the costs of their decisions. The taxpayers have also heard of the actions of this council to significantly increase fees to out-of-town users of our water system without consultation and without dialogue. So as taxpayers, is it their right to be heard on this matter? So what are taxpayers to do? Now, one option is to have 10% of the residents sign a petition to ask for a referendum on the path that the City Council has suggested we take. That said, 19,320 signatures of voters were needed. Now, point one, according to the Cities Act, the signatures on the petition must be accompanied with a printed first and last name, an address, and a date on which the petitioner signed the petition. Each signature must be witnessed by an adult person who shall sign opposite the signature of the petitioner. Now, I personally witnessed over 150 signatures. The city clerk may use a random statistical sample method with a 95% confidence level to determine the sufficiency of the petition instead of verifying that the requirements of subsection 3 have been met with respect to each petitioner. Now, the problem that I see is that the city clerk has, with her analysis, incorrectly and in an inappropriate way used the statistical sampling method to invalidate signatures. Now, subsection 3 only applies to whose signature is not witnessed, whose signature appears on a page of the petition that does not have the same purpose statement that is contained in all of the other pages of the petition, whose printed name is not included or is incorrect, whose street address is not included or is incorrect, if the date when the person signed the petition is not stated, or who has signed the petition before the date mentioned in Clause 107, Paragraph 4, subsection 3, or C. The city clerk is effectively using an inappropriate method to eliminate signatures. The city clerk cannot disqualify signatures if all of the required parts of the signature are there. Now, with all due respect, the city clerk has stepped beyond her authority. According to her numbers, there was sufficient number, i.e. 20,072, after taking away signatures that did not pass subsection 3. By coming to the conclusion of 20,072 at that point, the city clerk herself declares that she has gone through and verified the signatures and does not need to go through a further statistical sampling method to again verify the number of signatures. My second point is, under the Cities Act, the petition signature must be accompanied with the date on which the petitioner signed the petition. Now, there's no specific direction in the Cities Act as to how that date shall be presented. So the actions of the city clerk to take one option of date, and that one being the one that includes the year, is in my mind only one interpretation of the legislation. One could take the day and month on the petition as another interpretation of the legislation and therefore include them in the sufficiency test of the petition. Therefore, it is my assertion that it is inappropriate to take one interpretation over another. Without guidance in the legislation, one must begin with the broadest interpretation of the Cities Act, and that is to include the signatures. Now, all of the signatures were dated within the petition period because the petition was not available prior to the beginning of the period, March 22nd or World Water Day. The petition was submitted to the city clerk on June 20th, again within the 90-day petitioning period. Now, I was there on both occasions and can verify these two events. This, in my opinion, means that the petition has 2,834 more valid signatures, or 22,906, not the lower numbers stated in your report. I therefore make the following demand: that you state that the petition before you is sufficient, and that the referendum with the petition question be put to the taxpayers of Regina quickly, so that the future plans of the wastewater treatment plan can be determined and built prior to the requirements of the Government of Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott, for your presentation. Order, please. Please, I'm asking that the gallery to please respect the decorum of council. Questions of the delegation. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Mr. Elliott, for your presentation. The same question for you, the democratic piece aside. I presume you're someone who signed the petition, and if you could just clarify what the petition, why you signed it, what it really means for you. Thanks.
I think that comes probably in two parts. First of all, I don't feel that the P3 option or the P3 model that's being presented is the best model for the city. And I've made presentations to this council on those matters, so I don't necessarily think I need to repeat those unless someone wishes me to do that. The second part of this was that the citizens are simply asking for a vote on the decision. Nothing more, nothing less. I'm not necessarily going to forecast what the results were or will be, but my sense might be is that the vote will be lost, and therefore we'll have to go with a different option. But as with any democratic process, if the vote decides that we should go ahead with it, I'll follow that decision.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Other questions? You can return to the gallery, Mr. Elliott. We'll go to the next delegation. So Jim Holmes, if you could identify yourself and who you represent, you as well have 10 minutes to make your presentation, and we may have questions after.
Thank you. My name is Jim Holmes. It's a great honor to be here tonight, July 22nd, 2013.
Order, please.
As the representative of 24,231 Regina citizens who signed the wastewater treatment plant petition in 2013. The petition is an inspiring example of citizen involvement. It does not matter whether we support or oppose the privatization of the wastewater treatment plant. All citizens can be proud of this. City Council does have the authority to call its own referendum. We would suggest that the only honorable way to heal the damage that you have caused is to conduct a binding vote on the question signed by the petitioners.
Order, please.
You also need to release all of the information you are keeping secret about the business case for privatization. We know that your consultant, Deloitte, advised you to cut corners on the wastewater treatment plant P3. Whether you did cut corners or not is part of the information you will not release to the public. You cannot cut corners now on letting citizens have their vote. The city clerk is your employee. She is hired and fired only by a vote of council. You are responsible for the actions of the city clerk. The mayor and the city clerk say the petition failed because it did not meet the requirements of the Cities Act. We say the clerk's report does not meet the requirements of the Cities Act. The validation of the signatures. The Cities Act requires, Section 1803, sub 3, in counting the number of petitioners on a petition, the clerk shall exclude the name of any person whose signature is not witnessed, whose signature appears on a page of the petition, does not have the same purpose statement as contained on all the other pages of the petition, whose printed name is not included or is incorrect, whose street address or legal description of land is not included or incorrect, if the date when the person signed the petition is not stated, or who signed the petition before the date mentioned in clause 107.4c, E, and F. 107.4c. This process left 20,072 signatures according to the clerk's report, or 22,906 if we count the signatures about the 2013 date. The petition meets the requirement of the Act of 10% of the population of the latest census, which was 2011, or 19,310 signatures. The petition is valid. Instead does not mean also. Okay? There's some dictionary definitions. I'm going to go to the footnote here. Instead, as an alternative or substitute, as a substitute or equivalent, used for saying that one person, thing, or action replaces another. In our opinion, instead does not mean also. Unfortunately, at this point, the clerk decided to start a second process of verification by random sample. In our opinion, this was illegal. 108.4. A clerk may use a random statistical sampling method with a 95% confidence level to determine the sufficiency of the petition instead of verifying that the requirements of subsection 3 have been met with respect to each petitioner. Random sampling the wrong section. The random sample is only to be applied to the requirements of section 108, which is that it has the same purpose statement, name, address, date, witness. The clerk wrongly applied random sampling to the requirements of section 106, which is that only electors of the City of Regina are eligible to be petitioners. To be an elector, you must be a Canadian citizen, 18 years or older, and a resident or landowner in Regina. Those requirements were met by an attestation. 106.3 of the Act B states, a statement to the fact that by signing the petition, the petitioner is attesting that she is an elector of the city and has not previously signed the petition. Above all the signatures on the wastewater treatment plant petition, and remember there were none that weren't the same, was the following bolded attestation. By signing this petition, the petitioner attests that he or she is a Canadian citizen and is 18 years of age or more and an elector of the city, a resident or property owner of Regina, and has not previously signed the petition. That attestation is very similar to the one voters sign in a municipal election. Voters are required to produce identification for identity and residence. Voters are almost never asked to produce evidence of age or of citizenship. The clerk's unauthorized application of random sampling to Section 106 did indeed uncover some shortcomings. Random sampling has not been applied to the poll books, even in recounts as close as 36 votes. Such an examination might produce a similar level of shortcomings. It is important to remember the petition does not decide the question. If we citizens get a vote on this question, it gets the citizens a vote. When we vote on the referendum, the normal process will then be used to reasonably ensure that only qualified citizens vote. The random sampling is only to be used instead of examination of every signature. Once that first examination is complete, there was no legal reason to phone any petitioner. Petitioners were not required to provide phone numbers. The phoning was an invasion of petitioners' privacy. It was totally inappropriate.
Order, please. I'm asking the gallery to please sustain from doing this. Thank you.
Worse, the clerk threatened petitioners with having their names withdrawn from the petition. And she actually carried out this threat for 6 citizens. I'll take it in a minute. This is what the Act says, 106.2. No name may be added or removed from a petition after it has been filed with the clerk. And then this is what the city clerk said, instructed her people from her verification list. The petitioner should be advised that by refusing to verify their information, their name will have to be withdrawn from the petition. Okay, 2013. The requirement to have the year and the date is not a requirement of the Act. It was inserted by the clerk as a result of her consultation with the dictionary. In the Act, which governs petition in Saskatchewan, it states the petition must indicate the day on which the petitioner signed the petition. But Swidnicki said there is no real definition of what date meant. I went with the definition of the dictionary, which means that it needs to include the day, month, and year. That's from News Talk Radio on June 28th, 2013. There are many dictionaries. Most do not include the explicit inclusion of the year that the clerk found. Most say day of the month or year. I'd refer you to the Oxford English Dictionary, which when I worked at the University Library as the mail clerk was the dictionary. The day of the month or year as specified by a number. What's the date today? And as an example, today's date. What's the date today?
Mr.
The
Holmes,
25th.
you should stick to your script.
Sorry, it's in the script in the footnote.
Not in the script that I have.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's in the footnote. You'll find that. Okay. Questions about the petition. 107.4. The petition must have attached to it a signed statement of a person stating that A, that the person is the representative of the petitioners, and that the city may direct any inquiries about the petition to the representative. The city clerk never directed any inquiries to the representative of the petitioners. She stopped communicating to Waterwatch, except by media statement, after June 27th, 2013. She stopped making any media statements about July 15th, 2013. The signature threshold. Jim Reiter, Saskatchewan Minister of Government Relations, wrote to the city clerk June 18th, 2013, denying her request to increase the number of signatures required. Authorizing the use of higher population figures for the purposes of validating a petition might unfairly impact the sufficiency of the petition.
Mr. Holmes, you have 1 minute to go.
Okay, and I believe it would not be a proper exercise of my discretion. The actions of the city clerk have brought the entire city of Regina into disrepute. All of us who live here suffer from her actions. We have listened to thousands of citizens. Now citizens are telling us they do not believe the city clerk is acting independently. They believe she's being instructed or influenced to behave in this fashion. It does not matter what I believe. Our problem, everyone in this chamber's problem, is what our fellow citizens believe. You can repair Regina's reputation. You can only do that by releasing all the information about the business plan for the privatization of the wastewater treatment plant. You must order a binding referendum and the resolution containing the petition. You cannot cut corners. Nothing less will allow us to put this sorry chapter of our history behind us.
Order, please. Order. The gallery, please stop. And your time is up.
Yes, I'm finished.
Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Mr. Holmes, for your presentation. Again, the same, no surprise, the same question for you. Democratic piece aside, in a nutshell, what's really at the heart of this petition? Thanks.
What is at the heart of the petition? The petition itself clearly states that Regina's wastewater treatment plant should be publicly financed, operated, and maintained. There's no question that the plant would be built by a private sector company. We don't have any construction capability to do this in the city of Regina, but we think it should be financed. The financing is going to be part of our debt limit. You've already applied to have that covered. And the cost of keeping the plant running is going to come out of the sewer rate. There's no question about that. There's no dispute about that. And we need it. We need it badly, and we need to have it online by the end of 2016. So that's what the petition said. We did tell people that the petition will not decide that question. Your signature will not decide that question. What your signature do will get you a vote. People said, some people, not many, most people signed. I would think about half the people we approached signed this petition. Some people said to us, it doesn't matter if I sign. They are going to do whatever they want. And we said, no, it's okay. I mean, this is a legal process. This will work. It happens. It's clear, spelled out. If we get enough signatures, there will be a vote. So I'm hoping that will happen. That's what it was about. I don't know exactly which date. I did find when we were going through checking, trying to take the bad signatures off, I did find my signature on there. I can't tell you the date I signed it on. I can tell you for certain the year. It was 2013.
Okay, thanks.
You can return to the gallery. We'll move to our next presenter.
Okay, thank you.
Sean Tucker, please. If you can identify yourself, who you represent, you as well have 10 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
My name is Sean Tucker. I'm here representing myself. Dear Mayor Fougere and councillors, last Friday I wrote to you to express my disappointment with the city clerk's decision regarding the petition for a referendum on the funding model for the proposed wastewater treatment plant. Since then, I have carefully read over relevant sections of the Cities Act, hereafter I'm going to refer to as the CA, and the entire City of Regina Clerk's report, CM13, dated July 22nd, 2013, in which the clerk provided a rationale for determining the petition is insufficient. I believe, like others that are presented tonight, that the clerk has misinterpreted two sections of the CA, and in doing so, come to the incorrect conclusion about the sufficiency of the petition. And the first argument I want to make relates to the clerk's incorrect counting process for petitioners. I believe the clerk has misinterpreted the process for counting petitions as outlined in Section 108 of the Cities Act. On page 2 of her report, the clerk states, quote, in accordance with Section 108 of the Cities Act, during the initial counting phase, 4,289 were stricken from the petition. The city clerk has no discretion in this regard, as the Act clearly states in this section that names of petitioners shall be excluded as follows, end of quote. On the same page of her report, the clerk notes, quote, as one of the requirements for signature on the petition is that only electors of the city are eligible to be petitioners. A random sampling of petitioners was undertaken, outlined in the Cities Act, Section 108, subsection 4, end of quote. Jim just read Section 108. I won't read it again. I will highlight, however, 108, subsection 4. A clerk may use a random statistical sampling method with 95% confidence level to determine the sufficiency of the petition instead of verifying that the requirements of subsection 3 have been met with respect to each petitioner. Contrary to the clerk's statement that she, quote, had no discretion in how to count petitioners, the CA gives the clerk a choice between two methods. Note that Section 108, subsection 4 explicitly states that the random sampling method can be used, quote, instead of verifying that the requirements of subsection 3 are met. Nowhere in the CA does it state that the clerk can use both methods for counting petitions. It is either the process prescribed in subsection 3 or the process in subsection 4, not both. Therefore, it is inconsistent with the CA for the clerk to describe subsection 3 as, quote, an initial counting phase. It just doesn't exist in the legislation. The clerk's justification for using the random sampling method after using the method in subsection 3 is that she needed to determine who among the petitioners are electors. Notwithstanding my previous argument that a clerk is not permitted to use both methods for counting petitioners, the sections of the CA related to petitions, these are sections 106 to 112 inclusive, do not provide the clerk with other methods for determining whether petitioners are electors. Rather, a petitioner claims they are an elector by providing the information required, their address, their name, their signature on the petition. Furthermore, individuals are witness when they sign the petition. I would really encourage councillors to ask the clerk why she interpreted Section 108 in the way she did. In conclusion, the CA gives a clerk a choice between one of two methods of counting petitioners. The method the clerk initially used is outlined in Section 108, subsection 3. As a result of this procedure, 20,072 signatures were found to be valid. The threshold for a successful petition is 19,310. Therefore, it would seem that this petition is sufficient and that the question should stand. It is not negotiable. The question is not negotiable. The second area where I think the clerk has misinterpreted the CA relates to Section 108, subsection 3, subsection E. I won't read that section. That's already been read. On page 2 of the clerk's report, she states, quote, in accordance with Section 108 of the Cities Act, during the initial counting phase, 4,289 were stricken from the petition. The city clerk has no discretion in this regard, as the Act clearly states in this section that names of petitioners shall be excluded as follows, and one of the reasons given, quote, the date is not stated or is incorrect, and in parenthesis of this number, 2,834 had no year included. Well, if we look at the relevant section, this is 108, subsection 3, part E and F of the CA. It instructs the clerk to exclude a petitioner if the date when the person signing the petition is not stated, or if they sign the petition before the petition was officially open. These subsections are intended to exclude petitioners who provide no date or date before the start of the petition. A reasonable person would look at the 2,834 petitioners who did not provide the year in the date field of the petition and conclude that the petitioner provided a partial or incomplete date. However, the clerk has determined that in these cases there was no date stated, or they were in violation, somehow they signed before the petition began, which makes no sense. In summary, I, like many other citizens, feel that the actions of the city clerk have undermined the democratic process in the city of Regina. The standard for validating a petition to instigate a referendum appears to be inconsistent with the Cities Act. Your Worship and Councillors, I ask you to give serious consideration to the arguments and the presentations you're hearing this evening, and to honor the petition for a referendum on the funding model for the wastewater treatment plant. The question is not negotiable. The question has already been settled. We just need approval for the referendum. Thank you.
Thank you. Order, please. Order. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Mr. Tucker, for your presentation. Just the same question you, not about the democratic process, but about what's really at the heart of this petition. Thanks.
Yeah, I did sign the petition. I've emailed the clerk and asked if my signatures counted. I haven't heard back yet about that, but I did sign the petition, and why I signed is I think that core public services such as wastewater treatment are ultimately better left in public hands and operated by the public. In other jurisdictions I've lived in British Columbia, for example, I do recall going to hockey arenas that were funded by P3-style schemes, and how poorly they were run and how inadequate the facilities were. And I don't think that's a road we want to go down with our wastewater treatment.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Other questions? If there are none, you can return to the gallery, and we'll go to the next delegation. Bob Ivanocho. I hope I got that right. If not, you'll correct me. If you could please identify yourself, who you represent, and you have 10 minutes for your presentation as well.
Bob Ivanochko, I'm representing myself. Shame on the city clerk, and shame on the mayor and city council if you accept the city clerk's report as an objective statistical analysis of the validity of the petition. The method used by the city clerk's office pretends to be an objective and statistically accurate attempt to analyze the petition for signatures of eligible voters and to eliminate those who are ineligible. I think that is a fair and reasonable thing to do. I am aware that some of the people who signed the petition are ineligible, and a statistical analysis is a reasonable way to analyze the petition without having to do a check on each of the signatures. But that is not what the city clerk's office has done. I was one of the many volunteers who collected signatures for the petition. In most cases, I was able to confirm that the person signing was an eligible voter. This was not a bureaucratic process as in an election with paid clerks and desks with verification documents and the clerk writing down all the information except for the signature. Most of the collecting was on the streets or in public locations with wind and other natural complications. The petitions were usually signed on unstable boards, so the clarity was often limited. My experience was that many people knew about the petition and were anxious to sign it, and even though I usually tried to tell them how to fill in each column, many people guessed at what to write in the column or copied the format of the line above that might have been wrong. An example is that the signature may have ended up in the column of the printed first name or last name. Sometimes both members of a married couple signed the petition. The first person put in the address, the next person put in ditto marks. I did not collect signatures in any other year, either before or after 2013, so I did not tell people to write in the year as it was obvious. I was surprised how many people automatically included the year. It is not obvious from the city clerk's report about what criteria were required for complete street addresses, but I can imagine that this is also strictly interpreted. I am trying to express that the analysis did not try to determine who was eligible to sign the petition, but used methods to eliminate as many citizens as possible in order to invalidate the petition.
Order, please. I'll ask once again if the gallery can please refrain from entering into the discussion. Thank you.
I suspect that my signature would be invalid, as I doubt that I included the year when I wrote down the date. I might not have included my postal code. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much. Questions of the delegation? Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. The same question. First off, thanks for your presentation. And the same question to you, what is the petition about for you?
Well, I respect what Jim Holmes has said, as he was the main organizer, one of the main organizers for this. Personally, I would like to hear what the councillors have to say and why they think that a P3 is a positive thing. I personally have suspicions about it, but I'm not totally against the idea if it works out for the best. So I signed it because I want people who really question it, I think, have the right to have a vote, and I agree with that process. I think it would be good to hear both sides so we can make the best decision.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? If there are none, you can return to the gallery, and we'll go to our next delegation. Jessica Wood. Ms. Wood, if you could identify yourself as well and who you represent, and you have 10 minutes for your presentation as well.
My name is Jessica Wood, and I'm representing myself. The issue at hand today is a citizen's petition calling for a referendum, and the city clerk's report that has rendered this petition invalid. As others had mentioned, the city clerk has clearly used discretion in her interpretation of the Cities Act, and she appears to show a bias in this interpretation. I find it hard to believe that the level of scrutiny undertaken to invalidate signatures was initiated by a truly independent civil servant. My primary concern is the process that has taken place and comments made by Mayor Fougere following the public release of the clerk's report last Friday. I think these comments indicate a lack of respect for the people of this city and our rights as citizens. Last Friday afternoon...
Order, please.
Last Friday afternoon, Mayor Fougere stated to the media that a statistical sampling method used by the city clerk was, quote, required under the Cities Act, end quote, which, as we have heard, is not accurate. When pressed on this point, the mayor admitted on CBC Radio, quote, yes, it is a choice, but if you look at the Cities Act, it says that you can do that, end quote. Mayor Fougere acknowledged on Friday that after excluding the signatures that were deemed invalid due to issues with the date, there were still enough signatures to move forward with the petition. The mayor followed this with, quote, they did the statistical analysis on that, and that is how they brought it down, end quote. The key point here is that a statistical sample is useful in cases when you are not able to go through and validate each signature one by one. As it is made clear by both the clerk's report and the mayor's own statements, this was already done. Why then was a statistical sample necessary? The only reasons I can see to follow up with a statistical sample are 1, if the clerk was unaware of Section 108 of the Cities Act, or 2, if the clerk was not satisfied with the number of petitioners that were deemed invalid in accordance with subsection 3 of the Cities Act. When asked, how concerned are you that the will of the people is being ignored? The mayor replied with, there was, quote, 90% of the population who didn't sign it and may well want to go ahead and proceed with the current arrangement of a wastewater treatment sewage plant.
Order, please. Order. Order.
I'm going to continue the quote from the middle, so this is still within quotes. The current arrangement of a wastewater treatment plant or sewage plant, their voice should be heard as well, end quote. So that's in reference to the 90% of people who didn't sign the petition. I want to ask, is this response indicative of the mayor's understandings of what a petition and in turn a referendum is? If so, I see this very problematic, as it is a misunderstanding of the democratic process. By signing this petition, individual residents were not voting against a P3 agreement. They were asking for the right to be consulted. A petition put forward...
Order.
A petition put forward requesting a referendum is one of the very few options for citizens to participate directly in public decision-making processes. I am most concerned that the mayor views silence on the part of citizens as support for his position on this and possibly other issues. I feel obligated to use my shaky voice for a second time, since the first time when I put pen to paper and signed my name to the petition, it was not respected or aptly acknowledged. I ask the mayor and councillors to acknowledge that a significant portion of the population is requesting a voice in this debate. I ask you to take issue with the process and the resulting clerk support and further accept the petition as valid and sufficient and move forward with the referendum processes with the question as it stood. Thank you.
Order, please. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Mrs. Wood. Same question for you. Democratic process aside, what does this petition, when you signed it, what did it really mean for you? Thanks.
I'd just like to say I'm uncomfortable with putting the democratic process aside. but also it doesn't really matter whether or not I support a P3. This petition, the people who put it together were very careful to word the question in a way that made sense and should be voted on. I signed my name to it to ask for more information and to be involved in the decision. I find that there are way too many unanimous decisions from this council, and I'd like more information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Order, please. I would just ask the members of the gallery to please respect the rules. You're here to listen, and this is democracy here. You're listening. You're having an influence on what council is doing. So I ask you to please refrain from participating in the debate. Order. Next delegation is Matthew Meckelborough. Please identify yourself, who you represent. You have 10 minutes for your presentation and maybe questions afterwards.
My name is Matthew Mickelborough, and I'm here representing myself. Good evening to all parties present. I'm concerned. This likely won't come as much of a shock to council, judging by what brought me here in the first place, but I really do, and at times very strongly, disagree with your policies. I believe in a different vision for Regina than what is taking shape within the confines of City Hall. And you know what? I'll be honest. Sometimes it bugs me. I mean, it really gets to me. Makes me grit my teeth, curse, and spit that what I believe are the best decisions and policies aren't the ones being enacted, but instead that a fairly diverging theory of Regina, my city, is the one that's slowly being built. But you know what? At the end of the day, I'm okay with that, because I have to be. That's democracy. It sure ain't perfect, but greater men than I have tried and failed to present a realistic, attainable alternative. And the true beauty of what it is that democracy thrives, and the true beauty of it is that democracy thrives when dissenting opinions are brought together and forced to coexist. What that means, though, is that you won't always get your way. Beliefs and opinions are elected in and out of office based on a city or province or nation's needs and desires at that moment in time. You, Regina City Council, my City Council, have just such a mandate right now to enact whatever policy you judge to be in our city's best interests. And I honestly wish you well in that pursuit. It is a thankless job. No matter what policy you put in place, someone's ideology is going to be offended. Except, I'm not here to talk about policy or political opinion. So let's just take all these P3s and all of our wastewater treatments and wrap them up, set them aside. I'm here to talk about democracy and about you, my elected representatives, and how you are actually doing at your job that's now elected of representing your constituents. Here's what I see happening. Council approves of a new plan for city infrastructure. Some concerned citizens disagree. These citizens disagree so strongly about it that they decide to set into motion the most powerful, legitimate, legal, and democratic recourse they have, the humble petition. These citizens slap shoe to concrete for 90 days to try to drum up 10% of their fellow citizens' signatures. Referencing previous municipal election turnouts, we know how tricky this can be at times. And let's be clear, this petition wasn't saying burn the drafts, trash the proposals, and fire those responsible. No, all it was legally entitled to, all it wanted, was a referendum. A chance for Regina to take a closer look at the proposed changes. And you know what? They did it. These women and men got the numbers. They got people on board at the farmers market, at Mosaic, even just stepping out of workplaces and pubs. Over 24,000 people from all over the city, a full 25% more than they needed, even after the petitioners scrubbed the list clean of any obviously flawed signatures. They did it. That is democracy. That is the will of the people manifested, and that is a mandate, a stronger mandate than any one person assembled in this room possesses. And Council, what is your response to this inspiring and irresistible outpouring of citizens' democracy? You put up as many roadblocks in its face as possible. I ask, is that democratic? I feel you already know the answer. Your first roadblock. You tried changing the rules mid-game, moving the goalposts. hoping to get the province to update population counts that would draw the required number up. Having failed, and in fact having only served to draw neutral parties into your opponent's corner through the simple, blatant audacity of your attempt at tampering, it seems like he simply started to make things up. Suddenly, the most important aspect of his signatories' efforts is not the verifiability of their name or city address. It is whether or not they wrote the year on a petition that is without a shadow of a doubt from one very specific moment in time in one very specific calendar year. Is this in the spirit of democracy, or is it simple partisan gamesmanship designed to defeat the opponent at all costs? And that still wasn't enough. You still had to keep whittling. So you began to over or underinterpret as fit your needs the legal limits of the Cities Act from which you drew your authority, ultimately culminating in a series of bizarre phone call questionnaires. I find a quote here from the 20th century sadly fitting. It isn't the vote that counts, it's who counts the votes.
Order, please. Order.
And to paraphrase the dog, these are some seriously bad optics. And don't start now trying to hide behind the city clerk is an independent party just doing her job shtick. That is as patronizing as it is disingenuous. Everyone gathered in this room can see what is going on here, and it isn't simply due diligence. And it sure isn't democracy. There is a will and a purpose and a direction to these moves you'd have to be willingly blind not to see. So yeah, that's the gist of the past few months. Is it representative democracy? Are we allowing the democratic process, regardless of personal bias, to move freely to the conclusions of the electorate? No. This type of action is held under no possible mandate. This is an affront to our mode of governance by the very people we entrusted it to, and all in the name of petty partisanship. But the best is yet to come. Council, you stridently, unyieldingly insist that this is Regina's best option, that objective fact points to this as taxpayers' only realistic choice in the matter. Fair enough. What are you so afraid of then? What scares you so much as to make a mockery of the same process that gives you your power? Why this stripping down of democratic form and function? If yours is the best, the only option, what could possibly go wrong by putting it to a simple vote? Do you not believe Regina's citizens are capable of making informed decisions? Do you not believe we are capable of reason or logic? Because that is how all this inescapably reads. The council knows best, so don't you fret about it, dear voter. Just come back in a few more years and vote me back in to keep saving you from yourself. If you and your plans for wastewater really are the best options for the taxpayers, then you, our representatives, should have no problem convincing the majority of us, those you represent, of that fact. Just like in a democracy. Thank you.
Order, please. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Thanks for your presentation. And my apologies for the redundancy here, but same question for you. What did signing the petition mean for you personally? Thanks.
I initially was kind of on the fence, mildly opposed, and I will actually refer you back to Jim Holmes, his response. He said it more succinctly and more eloquently than I ever will. But I understand you guys. $60 million. That's a big federal carrot. You guys maybe held over a barrel, but in the end, it's a second chance. Citizens of Regina decided that we need more information. We're not done with this yet, and I thought we went through all the necessary legal loopholes to do that, and that's where we're at, I guess.
Thanks.
Other questions? You can return to the gallery. We'll move to the next delegation, Florence Stratton. If you could identify yourself as well, who you represent, you have 10 minutes for your presentation.
$24,361 reasons to hold a referendum. My name is Florence Stratton. I'm a member of Regina Water Watch. Along with many other Regina citizens, I collected signatures for the petition calling for a referendum on the P3 funding model for our city's much-needed new wastewater treatment plant. The petition was launched on March 22nd, World Water Day. On June 20th, it was submitted to the city clerk. It contained 24,361 signatures, 5,000 more than are required to force a referendum. Enhancing the democratic process. Contrary to claims made by some councillors during the stadium debate, referendums have legal status in representative democracies throughout the world, including Canada. Regina itself has a long and proud history of referendums on expensive and/or contentious projects, including the upgrading of Taylor Field in the 1970s and the building of the Louvain in the 1980s. In those days, city councillors upheld democratic practices. They didn't even make citizens stand on street corners collecting petition signatures. They called referendums themselves. As those earlier councillors understood, referendums have a particularly crucial role to play in representative democracies. They enhance the democratic process by giving citizens a direct say on particular matters and by limiting the power of governments to do whatever they want between elections. Subverting democracy. Over the course of the wastewater treatment plant debate, City of Regina officials have made a concerted effort to subvert the democratic process. Here are 5 of their tactics. Tactic number 1, lack of transparency. Transparency is an essential principle of democracy. The decisions of elected officials must be open to public scrutiny so that citizens have sufficient knowledge to make informed choices. The City of Regina claims $78.6 million in savings if it uses the P3 model for the wastewater treatment plant. However, it refuses to release the calculations and assumptions on which this figure is based. In the copy of the Deloitte document obtained by Regina Water Watch through access to information, all the relevant detail has been redacted. The people have a right to know. Tactic number 2, intimidation. On 2 occasions that I know of, there may have been more, a city councillor shouted at one of us in a public place where we were collecting petition signatures, "You're lying, quit lying to the people." The bullying behavior of the councillors in question, Terry Hinks and Bob Hawkins,
Mr. Stratton, we didn't look at these before they came in, and in fairness to the character of members of council or anybody, we should be cautious about imputing something against the character of individuals. It's not fair to them. So I ask you to be careful.
This tactic was intended to scare off people who wanted to exercise their democratic right by signing the petition. It didn't work. 24,361 people signed. Thank you, Regina. Tactic number 3, changing the rules in the middle of the game. On June 14th, 1 week before the petition was due to be delivered to City Hall, the city clerk asked the province to increase the number of signatures required to force a referendum from 19,310 to 20,742. A major function of the city clerk is to render equal service to all by maintaining neutrality and independence. A neutral city clerk would not have asked the province to change the rules for the petition so as to advantage one side over the other. In so doing, the city clerk broke the rules of her office. I would like to add that in all my other dealings with the city clerk, she's been helpful, professional, and fair-minded. I can only assume that in her handling of the water petition, she acted under extreme pressure from other city officials. In any case, the changing the rules in the middle of the game tactic was also foiled, this time by the provincial government, which rejected the city clerk's request as a, quote, inappropriate intervention in municipal democracy. Tactic number 4, discounting petition signatures for frivolous and trivial reasons. In several instances, the steps the city clerk took in verifying the petition went well beyond what is required by the Cities Act. Further evidence her office was not engaged in a dispassionate review, as is mandated by law, but in the partisan process of invalidating every signature it could. The date is a case in point. A number of people who signed the petition did not include the year in the date column, but only wrote the month and the day, June 3rd, for example. The city clerk discounted all those signatures. Date is not defined in the Cities Act. The media cites the city clerk as saying she consulted the dictionary and the city's legal department in determining the meaning of date. In the dictionary that I have to hand, Webster's New World Dictionary, date is defined as day of the month. There's no mention of year in the definition. I, too, consulted a lawyer. In her opinion, it is not necessary for the year to be included in the date for the date to be valid, since the petition only existed between March 22nd, 2013 and June 20th, 2013. She also said that it is clear the city clerk's office was looking for de minimis omissions in its zeal to invalidate the petition. Courts typically ignore de minimis omissions because they are trivial matters that are not worthy of judicial scrutiny. Tactic number 5, harassing people who signed the petition. The city clerk's office telephoned people who signed the petition, asking them intimidating questions such as, do you live at such and such an address, and are you a Canadian citizen? People who couldn't be reached were left a threatening message saying that if they did not respond within 3 days, their name would be eliminated from the petition. The Cities Act does not mandate the city clerk to phone petitioners. It does not require a petitioner to provide a phone number or even to have one. Nor does it require petitioners to postpone vacations for 30 days after a petition they have signed has been submitted, just in case the city clerk phones them. The harassment of petitioners by the city clerk's office constitutes retaliation against people who have exercised their democratic right by signing the petition. Furthermore, it is calculated to intimidate and chill future participation in the lawful democratic process of signing petitions. Standing up for democracy. The democratic rights of Regina citizens have been trampled on. Democracy is a very fragile form of government. It needs to be promoted, not thwarted. Otherwise, it will be lost. Democracy is at a very low ebb in Regina. People want to be part of our city, but there's very little space for the citizens of Regina to voice their opinion and be sure they will be heard. Public consultations are a farce, a box to be ticked off on some city official's checklist, a means of legitimizing a decision that has already been made. When I was collecting signatures for the petition, a number of folks said it was no use their signing. City Hall will do what it wants no matter what we do. Sadly, it turns out they were right.
You have 1 minute to go in your presentation.
Even when 5,000 more signatures are collected than are needed to force a referendum, the city declares the petition insufficient. There's a connection between poor voter turnout and poor government engagement of citizens between elections. Is it any wonder that a mere 32% of eligible voters cast a ballot in Regina's last municipal election? In a true democracy, leaders listen to citizens. 24,361 citizens of Regina signed the wastewater treatment plant petition. To put that figure in perspective, the petition got more signatures than Mayor Fougere got votes in the 2012 municipal election. The people of Regina have spoken. We want to vote on the future of our water system. If City Council believes in democracy, it will give us that vote. It will also release all the information about the P3 funding model so citizens can make an informed decision.
Thank you for your presentation. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Mr. Stratton, for your presentation. Same question. What did signing the petition mean for you personally? Thanks.
So, yes, I signed the petition. I signed it because I believe all aspects of Regina's water system should remain in public hands. I have read the Hugh Mackenzie report. I have read the redacted version of the Deloitte report. I would like to read an unredacted version of that report so I can make a really informed decision regarding the financing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. No other questions? Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Ms. Stratton, for your colorful presentation. Did you collect signatures for the petition?
Yes.
Did you ever, when you approached people to sign this petition, ask them whether they were in favor of privatizing the waters of supply of Regina?
I told them what the petition was about, whether it was about privatizing the water system, yeah.
And do you know whether that position was asked by other people collecting signatures?
I have no idea. I was too busy collecting myself.
I just want to be sure you did tell them that this was about privatizing water.
I referred them to the question on the petition sheet.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Other questions of the delegation? There are none. You can return to the gallery and move on to our next delegation. Next delegation is Jeannie Ma. Jeannie Ma. If you could, order please. If you could identify yourself, who you represent. You have 10 minutes for your presentation. There may be questions afterwards.
Thank you. My name is Jeannie Ma, and I'm speaking as a citizen of Regina. The public trust and the water petition. Public servants are meant to hold the public trust. We expect our elected officials and our public servants to work towards the public good for the benefit of all citizens. This year, in 2013, over 24,000 citizens of Regina signed a petition to ask for a referendum on the wastewater treatment plant. The city clerk has deliberately misread the intentions of the citizens of Regina and of the Citizens Act when she eliminated 2,834 signatures because the date did not have a year. The Cities Act stipulates that a petition is allowed no more than 3 months to collect signatures and is valid only if 10% of the population has signed. If the Cities Act does not define date, and if the Cities Act demands that a petition be completed within 3 months, does that not imply that those 3 months would be consecutive within the same year in this case, and only within the time frame stipulated? If the year is missing, it is implied. The date is not ambiguous because a P3 wastewater treatment plant had not been discussed until February 2013. This was not an issue during the election in 2012. Launched on March 22, 2013, and delivered to City Hall on June 20th, 2013, the petition could only have been signed during March, April, May, or June of 2013. Time travel was not involved. It was claimed that some people had written 2012, 2015, or 2017. The misreading of the year seems to be a willful misunderstanding, or perhaps a very high intolerance of sloppy handwriting. This willful misreading is for no good reason, or rather, no reason for the public good. How dates are written is culturally specific. When I was studying French, I inserted a comma between the month and the year in the Anglo-Saxon style, and to my surprise, I was docked 1 point out of 20, a whopping 5%. So I quickly learned to write dates without the comma. If the date with the year was so important that over 10% of all signatures were deemed invalid, we should have known from the beginning that the date must include a year. Also, if a date is indicated only with numbers, we must know beforehand if we are to follow the universal mode of day, month, year, from the smallest to the largest unit, or the more illogical American style, month, day, year. Were signatures eliminated because of this manner of incorrect date as well? Which style is allowed? We don't know. No, we don't know why 782 other incorrect dates were eliminated. We only know that 3,416 signatures were eliminated because of incorrect dates. Each party should know the rules, and each party is expected to follow the rules. However, if the rules change during the process, we call foul. A week before the petition was submitted, the city tried to change the number of signatures needed. Now, by demanding a year after the fact, the city is rejecting names based on a technicality of their own creation, one that no one else knew about until the petitions were handed in. that 4,289 names, or almost 20% of the signatures, were eliminated before the telephone calls, which would determine the reliability percentage, seems problematic. Of the 1,008 people who responded, 888 were valid. That's almost 90%. Still, the citizens have spoken. 2,234 citizens of Regina, almost 50% of all voters during the last election. This report from the city clerk shows disregard for the citizens of Regina, for our city, and for the democratic process. Referenda and plebiscites have been used as a mode to determine civic consensus in Regina's history. The new Central Library in 1959, the expansion of Taylor Field in 1977, and fluoridation in 1985, just to name a few. This rejection of a valid petition, because the year was not included in a date, in a petition which only had become a civic issue in 2013, shows contempt for our own citizens. It tramples on our goodwill and on the public trust. This is a sad day. Democracy is not respected in City Hall. Democracy is diminished in the city of Regina.
Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Thanks for your presentation as well. Again, same question for you, if you could just explain what signing the petition meant to you personally. Thanks.
Well, signing the petition wasn't against or for the P3 wastewater treatment plant. We were asking for a referendum to have a discussion on this issue. Regina has been known, as I said, to have referendum questions. And if we're making, and it probably should have happened for the stadium because it was a big ticket item which we're going to go into debt for. Now, if we're changing something as serious as changing from a wastewater treatment plant which is public, and we did used to call this Regina Public Works, to a private system, I think it's something that we should have a discussion about, and we should look at the numbers seriously on both sides.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. No other questions. You can return to the gallery. Next delegation is Paul Gingrich. If you please come forward and identify yourself, who you represent, and you have 10 minutes for your presentation as well.
Thank you. My name is Paul Gingrich, and I'm representing myself, and I signed the petition. My comments concern the report wastewater treatment plant petition for referendum 2013. Prepared by the city clerk and addressed to His Worship the Mayor. Given my experience as a University of Regina professor who taught statistics for 35 years, I have questions about parts of the report. I do not ask these to express doubts about the thorough work conducted by the office of the city clerk. What I raise are the types of questions I'd have about any statistical report, and to identify where decisions were made that might have been different. I'll proceed through the issues the report raises for me. The first one is street addresses incomplete or incorrect. This is mentioned twice on page 2 of the report, first noting that 434 petitioners were deleted as a result of street address being incomplete or incorrect. But in the sample of 1,008, another 46 are listed as street address incomplete or incorrect. My question is whether the 46 were also included in the 434. If included, they were counted twice for deletion. I trust that that's not the case, but the report's not entirely clear on this. Verification, the report states a random sample of petitioners was undertaken and verification of 1,270 petitioners was attempted. However, the report does not indicate the method used to verify signatures. Was it by mail, email, telephone, in person, a combination of these, or some other method? And there's no indication of what questions were asked of those who were contacted or what letters or scripts stated. The report merely notes 262 of these petitioners were not able to be reached or did not return repeated messages. It's unfortunate that the report does not provide information on this, since different contact methods and script can lead to different types of response and response rates. Margin of error of 3% is mentioned on page 1 of the report and helps form the basis for the estimates of the number of valid signatures at the top of page 3. The Cities Act contains no reference to margin of error. I won't go through the quote, but there's no mention there. There's no mention here of margin of error, so I'd be curious to know how the decision to use the 3% margin of error was made. The 2012 City of Regina Citizen Survey base report produced a 3.98% margin of error with 95% confidence. In some surveys, the margin of error is even larger. Someone must have decided what margin of error to use, and who made this decision and what were the reasons for the 3% margin of error are not stated. Any decision concerning the margin of error makes a difference in the reported number of valid signatures. Proportions or percentages. This is a minor point, but one I always corrected my students on. It's that numbers such as 87.4% are percentages and not, as stated in the report, proportions, as reported at the top of page 3. The non-response rate of 20.6%. On page 3, a paragraph is devoted to the supposedly large 20.6 non-response rate, meaning the number of valid signatures could be as low as 13,248. For those involved in surveying or contacting people by mail or telephone, non-response is a serious problem, especially since those not contacted may have characteristics different from those contacted. As for 20.6% being a large non-response rate, I disagree, although without knowing what methods were used to initiate contact with petitioners or what they were told, it's difficult to make a definitive statement. The National Household Survey, which Statistics Canada used to replace the long form on the 2011 census, had a 28.6% non-response rate for Regina, and results from this will presumably be used for future planning. The University of Alberta Population Research Lab has been conducting telephone surveys across Alberta since 1991, and in these surveys, and here I quote from an article, non-contact rates experienced an even greater increase, starting at only 5% in 1991 and jumping to 37% in 2007. So contrary to what the statistician is reported to have said concerning the unusually high non-reply rate, the sampling results do not indicate a high level of non-response. You're not included. Now, the most important decision in validating signatures is, of course, the non-inclusion of 2013 in the date. If the 2,834 petitioners who did not include the year are included, there would have been 22,906 signatures after the initial counting phase. Applying the sampling finding that 87.4% of signatures were valid, this means that there were 20,020 valid signatures. Then using the 3% margin of error, this means there were between 19,333 and 20,707 valid signatures. Even the lower end of this confidence interval exceeds the required 19,310 signatures. In conclusion, there are a number of issues that are not addressed in the report or where there is some confusion. It's clear that well over 20,000 Regina residents signed the petition in good faith expecting a referendum. My understanding is City Council can decide to proceed with the referendum, and I'd urge you as City Councillors to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gingrich. Harris. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for your work here, Mr. Gingrich. Same question for you. If you did sign the petition, what did it mean for you personally? Thanks.
Well, I think the first concern was the P3 model. I don't know that much about P3 models, but I've read a little bit about them, and I guess I worry about a certain creeping privatization. I realize that they're not entirely, it would not be entirely private, but certainly moving in that direction concerns me. And then talking to neighbors and others that many of whom seem to actually favor the P3 model, they were saying, well, why doesn't City Council come out with the figures, and let's see what the figures are on the two sides. I understand the Water Watch people have produced a report, but there doesn't seem to be the same on the City Council side. So I guess that's the reason I signed the petition, is that I thought that there should be a referendum, so some of this information could come out, and I really hope that the information will come out as we proceed through it if there is to be a referendum.
Okay, thank you very much.
No other questions? You can return to the gallery. Phil Johnson. So Johnson, if you could identify yourself and who you represent, and you as well have 10 minutes for your presentation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Phil Johnson, and I represent myself. I'm here to speak in favor of the petition and a referendum, and I did sign the petition. First of all, I'd like to thank the city clerk for her report that has inspired so many people to read parts of the Cities Act for the first time, and to inspire people like myself to make presentations to City Council for the first time. However, I have many concerns about the report. One is that the city clerk has expended considerable effort to prevent this petition from meeting the 19,310 number of valid signatures. It's hard to overlook the unsuccessful attempt she made to have the Saskatchewan government raise the number requirement just prior to the deadline for submission of the petition. This was a clear signal that the city was prepared to bend the rules in favor of the P3 proposal. It put people like me who believe in due process and fair application of the rules and law on high alert. A second concern is her decision to exclude signatures if the year was not clearly stated. Even if the day, month, signature, and address were complete and accurate, the clerk excluded the name from the petition. The Act does not stipulate that the statement of the year takes precedence over everything else. Absence of the year does not make a date wrong. Maybe it makes it incomplete, and even that is questionable. From the perspective of openness and fairness, the city clerk could have had her staff phone those people who had failed to include the year when they signed the petition, and to verify that they did indeed sign the petition in 2013. Would this have been any harder than phoning people to verify their names and addresses during vacation time? Of course, the clerk did not phone to confirm the year, perhaps because to do so would be ridiculous and a waste of time. Is there anyone here who seriously believes some of these petitions were, or some of the names were signed in 2012 or 2007? The intent of the signer is clear. He or she supports a referendum on the P3 proposal. To find otherwise is to make your biases and motives clear. A third concern is that the clerk, despite the help of legal counsel and an external statistician, has applied the Cities Act in a manner clearly contrary to Clause 108, subsection 4. That clause gives the clerk the option to either verify the petitioner's names and addresses and date signed by review of each name, or to use a random statistical sampling method. It does not say that she can do both. It says she can do either method, not both. But she used both methods, piggyback style. This appears to have been necessary in order to find the petition insufficient. Why is it so important to the city that this petition be found insufficient? I have several other concerns, including what commitments, financial, contractual, verbal, that the city has already entered into with the private sector with regard to the wastewater treatment plant. I would like to believe that the council will do the right thing in this matter. This could include giving the city clerk the opportunity to comply with the Act, recount the petition numbers in a fair-minded manner, and correct and resubmit her report. And why not invite representatives of Regina Water Watch to observe the count and hear the discussions over questionable signatures? Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Councillor Fraser.
Thanks to you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for your time and presentation here. Same question to you. As someone who I presume signed the petition, can you just speak to why you signed it? Thanks.
Well, I signed the petition, I would say, for two reasons. One is that I can't see a good reason for supporting essentially the privatization of a public service, which is it's a monopoly, and you're giving a lot of control to one provider over something that we don't have an option, we don't have a choice to use a different wastewater system. We will use this one. This will give this party, who controls the new system, a lot of power. I would say that's my main reason.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? We'll go to our next delegation, Gloria Bamford. If you could identify yourself and who you represent. You have 10 minutes for your presentation as well.
My name is Gloria Bamford. I represent myself. I probably have the shortest and most humblest presentation of all. I am a citizen, homeowner, and taxpayer, born and raised and lived my whole life here in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada. I oppose the privatization of any and all our city's natural resources. Water is a human right, and essentially, it's a human need. It should never be a resource that is for sale. We, all the citizens of Regina, deserve a fair vote and deserve our numbers signed on the petition to count. It is clear indication the people of Regina do not want this, regardless of the amount of signatures the city clerk deems invalid. Water comes from Mother Earth. City councillors are put in place of trust to do what is right, fair, just, humane, and protect those rights for the good of all. Natural resources should not be used for political gain. We would like to see that trust restored to us. Our city's officials, by giving us the right, the civil vote to protect our water from private corruption and greed. I want my vote to count. That's why I'm here tonight.
Thank you very much. Councillor, Ms. Bamford, there is a question. If you come back to answer a question from Councillor Fraser.
Hi there. Sorry about that. Thanks for your presentation. Same question for you as someone who signed the petition. What spurred you on to actually sign it? Thanks.
The first and foremost reason I signed the petition is because I do not want our public water supply privatized. And then the second one is I think it's such an important issue, protecting our water and our public water, that it should be voted on. It shouldn't just get passed through under the carpet where nobody's heard or is aware of what's going on. We should be informed, and we should have that right to vote for an important issue like that.
Thank you very much.
Other questions? We'll move to our next delegation. It's Bill Cleary. You can identify who you are, who you represent, and you have 10 minutes for your presentation as well.
Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity. My name is Bill Cleary. I represent myself. My comments were written prior to a radical shift in the mayor's position at the last minute, but I still think they're relevant, so I'll read them anyway. Citizens' right to petition for a referendum is a critical part of the checks and balances in our democracy. As a democratic society, we hold as sacred the voice of the individual to have a right to a say in the way in which our community moves forward. Our commitment to democracy runs so deep that we will send our young men and women into harm's way to assist in bringing democracy to other places in the world. And I invite you to consider that democracy is as vitally important at a civic level as it is at a national level. All democratically elected officials have as their primary duty an obligation to uphold the principles of democracy. I am here as a defender of the very democracy that so many of our parents and grandparents fought for and many died to protect. The clerk's decisions and actions as it relates to the wastewater treatment plant petition are deeply flawed and require an intervention by those that have been elected to office to uphold democratic principles. This unelected individual has arbitrarily, with the stroke of a pen, effectively silenced the voice of over 20,000 residents of this city. The mayor is quoted as saying that the sufficiency of it, referring to the petition, is not a debatable issue because the clerk is independent of council. She made her determination. End of quote. The clerk is an individual that is hired and can be relieved of her duties by the mayor and council, so it is by the very weakest of standards that we would feel comfortable calling this person independent. The public statements.
Order, please.
The public statements made by the mayor suggesting that the democratic rights of the people be left in the hands of an unelected city employee and that he and his council are powerless to challenge her methodology and her conclusions are troublesome. Equally as troublesome is the very real possibility that an elected official is hiding behind the clerk in order to shirk his responsibilities and ensure that his agenda is fulfilled. This is before there was a radical change, but the mayor's position is clear, is clearly stated. So it is to the councillors that I make an appeal to hold this anti-democratic action in check. I ask council to set aside the wastewater treatment plant issue for a moment and to look to your broader responsibility to democracy and to your constituents. As a council, you have the power to demand that a referendum be held. By doing so, you would send a clear message to the residents of this city that their voice counts, that when they get out and work together, they do in fact have the power to effect change. You would confirm that here in Regina, democracy is something much more than what happens every 4 years when we go to the polls. This in no way threatens your position as a council to support the P3. You will have ample opportunity prior to the referendum to inform the people of this city as to the wisdom of your choice. My friends, this is no small matter, as there is a significant impact when democracy is denied. We have a right to know if the clerk has in fact acted independently without outside influence. The citizens of Regina need reassurance that the current clerk is well suited to continue in a position that holds such power and responsibility. If the clerk has the power to silence over 20,000 residents of this city, it is vital that we know that she has done her job to a standard that our legal system would support. To make the petitioners whole, I ask that you request, as a council, a judicial review of the clerk's processes in coming to the determination of insufficiency. Council, stand on the side of democracy, hold a referendum, and request a judicial review. Thank you for this opportunity.
Councillor Fraser.
Thank you to you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Clare, for your heartfelt presentation. Same question to you. If you could just speak personally, signing the petition, what it meant for you. Thanks.
I'll be very brief. Public works belong in public hands. That's why I signed.
Thank you.
No other questions. I'll go to the next delegation, Catherine Gibson. If you could identify yourself as well and who you represent, you have 10 minutes for your presentation.
My name is Catherine Gibson, and I represent myself. Thank you, Mayor Fougere and members of City Council for permitting me to make this presentation this evening. Disclosure. With the exception of a 2-month summer job at the Regina General Hospital in 1957, I have never been a member of a union. I became involved with Regina Water Watch because I'm a great fan of Maud Barlow and because I believe that water is a public resource that belongs to us all. It is a human right and an essential human need, and this applies whether the water is new or used. I am here because the words of Stephen Harper to the effect that we won't recognize Canada when he is through with it causes me sleepless nights and makes my blood run cold. Over the past several decades and several federal governments, the infrastructure burden has been shifted from the body that has the most financial resources to the ones that have the least, that is, the municipalities. I do not believe that the federal government should have the right to put restrictions on infrastructure grants through the type of public-private partnership referred to as PPP Canada. I believe that every community should have access to federal infrastructure grant money for upgrading their wastewater treatment plant, with the only restriction being that the money must be used solely for that purpose. The petition. In my view, the main contention is with the federal government because of the type of public-private partnership that involves the private company in finance, operation, and management roles, and that the information relating to these 3 segments has not been made available to the public. It is neither open nor transparent. Quite the contrary, it is unbelievably redacted. I interpret the "be it resolved" statement of the petition as a resounding vote of confidence in the City of Regina and its employees in the manner in which they have financed, operated, and maintained the wastewater treatment plant in the past, and that they should continue to do so in the future. I am of the opinion that there is plenty of private involvement in the design and construction of this and all other municipal projects because the city does not have its own construction and/or design departments. The area of disagreement with the city relates to the feeling that this was a done deal long before the announcement of an expenditure of almost $250 million. I'm not aware of any public consultation or open houses, such as takes place with projects of far less costs and more discretionary use. We need the facilities of a wastewater treatment plant 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We need to know a lot more about what the final cost will be to each household to cover the interest on the private loans and any additional profit margins the consortium expects for the investment type loan it brings to the table. I'm going to skip the petition count because it's been covered. Dealing with the reality. I had originally decided to head this presentation with the statement, 24,232 reasons for ditching the P3 grant and strongly urging Ottawa to not tie funding to P3s. The gist of this was the gist of a resolution passed at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities annual conference, May 31 to June 3 in Vancouver in 2013. It is my understanding that the Regina delegates supported this resolution. A director with the Fraser Valley Regional District indicated her worry about the growing pressure to enter into risky P3s is because, in many cases, the overall costs of P3s are higher than traditional public projects. And the people she represents shouldn't be forced to blindly enter risky agreements. In her words, this is taxpayers' money. To be forced into an agreement that would cost more is just not right. I had always hoped that regardless of the outcome of the petition count, Council would take the step of passing its own resolution, a resolution that follows the spirit of the petition, saving both the time and the money that would be involved in holding a referendum. But while you're mulling over my brilliant suggestion, I would ask that you think about how profoundly the increasing costs of utilities affects the low-income group. For example, I assume that the 2012 average annual water bill might be $1,000. For a household with an income of $20,000, they will spend 5% on their water bill. If another household using the same amount of water has an income of $200,000, they'll barely notice the half of 1%. And this high-income family may also have the advantage of all the low-flow bells and whistles, and perhaps even a gray water recovery system for flushing and watering the lawn. The low-income family is probably flushing their money away 13 liters at a time. Please don't risk adding to their plight by making them contribute to a wealthy shareholder's profit. Conclusion. P3 contracts are complicated, lengthy, and require some kind of an advanced degree to decipher. P3s, when applied to public services, move taking from the poor and giving to the rich to an art form. Instead of approaching this matter from Deloitte down, please consider it from the citizens up. Please tell the federal government that you have, however many number of signatures you want to think, to back up your request for a no-strings infrastructure grant. Worst case scenario, you can assume that a great number of citizens have given their permission to you to ditch the P3 grant because it will save them money in the long run and give them the assurance that the tried and true public funding model is alive and well in Regina. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Councillor Fraser has a question for you.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Thanks for your presentation. You probably made this clear, but I'm just, if you would, why you signed it personally. Thanks.
I signed the petition on launch day, March the 22nd, 2013. I signed it because of two things. Probably the major thing was that I don't believe that a public service should be in private hands. I mean, there's bound to be profit that we have to take care of. P3s probably work okay in something that you don't need to use 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or that you have another choice. So the 407 in Toronto, which is a toll under a P3, people can choose to use it or not. As far as I know, when they talk about dual flush for toilets, it's only whether it's 6 liters or 13 liters, not whether it's into the private system or into the public system.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery. We'll move to the next delegation, Carl Churland. If you two could identify yourself, who you represent. You have 10 minutes for your presentation. There may be questions afterwards.
If I was an astronaut, do you know what I would be drinking right now? I would like to sincerely thank the City Council for their patience in dealing with this important issue. I appreciated previous opportunities of being able to speak to several of the City Councillors and also to the Mayor. I also appreciate the fact that I can sense that most seem to be interested in the general idea of getting the best wastewater treatment program for Regina that we can. We certainly appear to differ in how that should be realized. I would like to sincerely thank also those with the Regina Water Watch petition group who have worked so hard to bring this very important issue to the attention of so many of us who are living in Regina. I would like to thank and acknowledge all those 24,000 plus people in Regina for taking the time and the interest in signing the petition. I signed the petition the first night of the signing this last March 22nd, which happened to be World Water Day. That's March 22nd, 2013, to be absolutely clear. I supported the petition drive because of my keen interest in water, wastewater reclamation, and the sale of water for profit. Water, it says in my statement, water is a worldwide issue. Indeed, there is no more important issue than water, because without water, there is no life. Water used by us quickly becomes wastewater. Wastewater carries material from our use of the water. That's wastewater. It's still water. It's messy. So is democracy. In democracy, life is about community. Here is a famous saying about democracy. A democracy depends on the active participation of the citizens. Good evening, everyone. It is something I take very seriously, the active participation of the citizens. Obviously, many others want this participation also. Participatory democracy is what is needed here. And participatory democracy is what is being denied here. It is the right, it is indeed the responsibility of us living in a democracy, parenthetically, even a struggling democracy like ours, to be actively involved in important decisions which will affect us all long-term so profoundly. For the day-to-day operations, it is the job of you elected officials and the administration and workers to carry out the operations for a well-run city. However, for a project of this size and cost and impact that daily affects every woman, man, child, and beyond in such a profound way, we all need to be involved, informed, and have a voice. This petition calls for that. It doesn't call some feel-good ads from the city, basically saying, trust us. These ads in print are grossly insufficient to pass this important issue. This petition drive has been an important wake-up call for many of the citizens of Regina. It has been an important wake-up call to be involved in shaping our collective, sustainable, healthy, happy future. People signed the petition in good faith that the city leadership would act reasonably. Instead, these people's signatures have been aggressively and unreasonably removed and prevented with posturing by the city of obeying and interpreting the letter of the law. Their removal disregards the spirit and intent of signing the petition. It's like choking on a sliver, but swallowing a log. To quote a famous leader, this water and wastewater issue, of course, goes far beyond our city. But this is our turn to deal with the issue of water and wastewater. It's the same thing, just used. The global issue of water and water services for profit, privatization, is often cloaked as partnering. In point of fact, it is something more like control. Control of a most important public need. This is the largest infrastructure project in the history of our city that will affect all of us, if one looks beyond the stadium as an entertainment venue for some of us to use. The wastewater treatment was not an election issue. Not one of the hundreds of people I spoke with, not one, other than the mayor and one city councillor, was aware of this coming wastewater issue. A project of this importance and size to be flagged through without a whimper, without a peep or blink or gulp from the taxpayers of Regina would be absurd. Are we thought to be so sleepy, so passive, so bored, so immature, so complacent about our future that we would or should remain silent and complacent about a servant and issue which would affect us so intimately and profoundly for 30 years and beyond? We are also aware that eventually there will be other connections with fresh water in coming times. This wastewater petition and issue is about something that all of us use daily and send on down to our neighbors downstream. If that is what City Council expects of us citizens, it is an insult not to be borne. In this petition, we have shown our collective concern and interest, and we want the facts clearly before us. And the question on the petition presented to the citizens of Regina in a referendum. Speaking of questions, in talking to people, frequently asked questions to me and others are or include, and here's where I'll be willing to deviate from the order, or I'll take it straight as. Probably straight as. Okay, here we go. There was an independent economic review done by Hugh Mackenzie, who of this council have carefully read and digested this report and given consideration to it. What is the involvement of Deloitte Touche in this project, and why does its name appear with so many other P3s in Canada? What is the city leadership hiding to go to the lengths it has to prevent us from having a say? If this project is so big and so costly, why was it not an election issue? If it took years and a fair amount of public input for the recycling program that is finally being phased in, why so little public input, and why not free, clear information to the public on an issue that so intimately affects every person in this city? Why are so many cities rejecting P3s or paying dearly to get out of them? Is there a legal case to be made that the city showed clear bias? If the city can afford a 10-fold increase in six-figure salaries to the cost of over $50 million per year, what's the problem with the cost of this referendum? People have been asking me, what are the powers that are so strong that have influenced the city to take such aggressive measures to prevent this petition from succeeding? Indeed, the first attempt was to increase the number of signatures needed. The city wanted to give this petition a rough ride indeed. Next, the posture about obeying the law and discounting signatures. Are you aware of an article written by Nelson Bennett that appeared in Business Vancouver, June 27, 2012, entitled Vancouver Potash Company to Buy Regina Wastewater? Bennett states that the City of Regina has signed an agreement with Western Potash Corp from Vancouver. The article states that Regina will be paid $200 million over 45 years for treated wastewater to be used at a new potash mine south of Regina. Is it true? If so, why are the city councillors I spoke with unaware of this? What impact does this signed agreement have on the resistance the City of Regina has placed on the petition? Is this agreement already happening?
You have 1 minute left in your presentation.
Thank you. Have our elected leaders read Hugh McKenzie's recent financial analysis of the City of Regina wastewater treatment plant expansion and upgrading of this spring of 2013, of course? Yeah. There was a recent documentary televised on the Passionate Eye on CBC called Last Call at the Oasis. Have you seen it? I highly commend it to you. It deals with water and wastewater and would be very important to consider what it discloses. For the sake of our children and children's children coming on down, the stakes are very high. Why doesn't the City Council take a moral high ground? A large portion of the voting citizens of Regina want a referendum on this issue. Why let a self-created questionable technicality stand in the way of a democratic action? Call a referendum using the question in the petition this fall. I close. Want to see broken democracy appear? Look at Regina. If City Council denies its citizens the referendum on the wastewater treatment issue, check out Regina's spring. That's 2013. I asked the City Council to hold a referendum on the public resolution stated in the petition.
Your time is up. Thank you. Councillor Fraser has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for your presentation. Same question for you. As someone who signed the petition, could you just tell me why, what it meant for you personally to sign it? Thanks.
I think the best reasons have already been stated. I would simply agree with theirs that private concerns are important to be removed in public needs like water. Putting earrings on a pig, you still have a pig.
Yes, sir.
Next delegation is Mr. John Hopkins. Mr. Hopkins, if you could identify who you represent, and there'll be questions afterwards, perhaps.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of Regina City Council. My name is John Hopkins, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Regina District Chamber of Commerce. I am here tonight representing the 1,250 members of our Regina business organizations. Your Worship, for the record, I would like to state that we are this community's local Chamber of Commerce with roots that stretch back into the 1880s. We were here at the community's inception, throughout the Great Depression, the World Wars, the periods of limited and no growth, and most recently during this period of economic prosperity. In short, we have been here in the past, and we will certainly be here in the future. Your Worship, tens of thousands of people did not sign the petition in question tonight. Many did not because the claims being made are simply not true. There are people in this community who want the safest, most efficient sewage treatment plant for their hard-earned tax dollars, which can be delivered by a public-private partnership. Many people understand...
Order, please. Please let the delegation make the presentation as you had made your presentations.
Many people understand that this is a complex project with a great deal of risk. Risks that can be transferred to the private sector. Many people do not want to pay higher taxes and get an inferior sewage treatment plant. Lower taxes and a higher quality sewage treatment plant can be delivered using a public-private partnership. Your Worship, any claim that using a design, bid, build model is cheaper than a design, build, finance, operate, and maintain model is misguided at best. Moreover, how can anyone claim that there is little or no risk in a complex $224 million project? Simply defies logic. The truth of the matter is there is risk, and ultimately risk to the taxpayer. According to global experts with global reputations at risk, the P3 model approved by Council in February is the best model which will save our community $80 million over the 30-year life cycle of the project. Moreover, we need to be very clear that the federal government's $58.5 million contribution is at risk and will have to be made up by taxpayers. Truthfully, this can only mean one of three things: higher property taxes, higher utility rates, or a combination of both. What is the true cost of saying no to the P3 model for the sewage treatment plant? We know that it will be at least $80 million over 30 years, with a majority of that being in the first few years. But what does that mean to the average homeowner? What about the average business? And Your Worship, what about risk? The likelihood of a cost overrun under the design, bid, build model is high and could be impacted by design flaws, construction delays, and a lack of expertise at City Hall. What if the project goes over by 10% or $22 million? How about 25% or $56 million? How about 50% or $112 million? Or perhaps 75%, $168 million? Or what about a cost overrun of 100% or $224 million? Who will have to pay the cost overruns if we say no to the public-private partnership? The truth? Taxpayers. Under the P3 model, the risks will fall to the private sector partner and not the taxpayer, which could save homeowners millions. Is this project about the privatization of water? The truth? No. There is no secret agenda to privatize water. First of all, we are talking about building as a sewage treatment plant, not a water treatment plant like in Abbotsford. Moreover, what goes in and what goes out of the facility, including the facility itself, will always be owned by the citizens of Regina, with City Council controlling the rates. Your Worship, We don't need higher taxes and or higher utility rates, particularly if we are getting an inferior product at the end of the day with a design, bid, build model. Before I close, I would like to make a few comments about the importance of the private sector in our daily lives, which apparently is funny. For those who believe the private sector would supply an inferior product, I would like them to think about doctors, lawyers, accountants, pharmacologists, most of the media, engineers, architects, and the list goes on and on. These professions are predominantly in the private sector. Where do we get prescription drugs from? Drugs that in many cases keep many of us alive. The private sector. Where do you get legal advice for some of the most important decisions in life? The private sector. Who do we trust to build our cars to protect some of our most precious cargoes? Our kids. The private sector, unless you own a Lada. This is not to say that the work performed in the public sector is not adequate, but rather to say that any notion that the private sector is inept or that we don't care about quality and safety is completely not true. The private sector products and services provide all of us with safety and security in our day-to-day lives. In February of this year, you made the right decision. That decision was made after a great deal of due diligence, which is paramount to making a $224 million decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hopkins, for your presentation. There are questions. Councillor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship, and thank you very much, Mr. Hopkins, for coming forward. My only question would be just around your members. Have you polled your members, asked their opinions around the proposal that's before us?
We have talked to members and about, in fact, we've been talking about public-private partnerships for many, many years. We talked to our members about that during the whole discussion about the RRI and had some discussion about that, as well as other P3 projects throughout Canada. We've looked at P3 models across Canada, including places like Moncton, where everybody's happy.
I guess just to...
Order, please. Will you please let the delegation answer questions as you were allowed to answer questions and ask them as well, please. Order.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate that. It is trying sometimes when... but...
Order.
Mr. Hopkins, my question was actually...
Order, please. I'm hoping that the audience will respect the fact that we respect differing and divergent views at council. That is part of the democratic process. Please let them answer questions and ask questions.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I'll direct my question to
Please.
Mr. Hopkins. My question was in regards to the petition and the desire to have a petition by a group of our citizens. How does your members feel? Do they have an opinion on that, Your Worship?
I think that the democratic right of people to hold a petition drive, and if they're successful in getting the number of signatures that they need to force a referendum, that's democracy. I absolutely agree with that.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you,
Mr. Hopkins.
Other questions? Oh, there are none. Thank you very much, Mr. Hopkins. You return to the gallery. We have one last presentation this evening. This is an additional one that was D13104, and Evangeline Godron, if you could please come forward. If you could identify yourself and who you represent. You have 10 minutes for your presentation, and we may have questions afterwards.
I'm Evangeline Godron, and I represent myself. To save time, I will ask myself the question. Did I sign the petition? You bet I did. Why did I sign the petition? Well, for most of the reasons that the people here gave.
Can you actually stick to your, could you just go with your, may have questions afterwards, but your script that you sent to us, your note, could you please just refer to that?
I can't answer your question first. Is that what you're saying?
I would ask that you, as we did with every delegation, to go with the presentation you put forward earlier. This one here, the email that you sent? This one?
Yeah.
If you could please refer to that. Thank you.
Okay. I'm in favor of the petition and opposed to the methods that the powers that be here seem to be having, trying to dissuade or prevent the petition going ahead.
Ms. Godwin, I'm just wondering if you could follow your presentation that you left
Yes,
us.
it deals with.
Will you just read it, please? Thank you. That's a standard.
It's a rough note, so it'd be very rough to read.
I understand.
You
that.
want to hear my rough reading, eh?
You go right ahead. Yes, thank you.
I'm discussing essentially what's in it, that I'm opposed to this idea of coming up with a date, including the year. When we vote, and when I voted in the city election, I vote all of them. Did I put a date, including the year, on the ballot? Maybe all of you should resign in mass, because there was no 19
I'm
whatever.
really being lenient, but can you just read what you sent us? It would be simple. That says, if you just read what you sent us.
Well, this
please.
is essentially what I said.
Well,
These are rough
please.
points.
I'm asking you to read it, please. I'm asking you to just please read what you have given us.
He's making you read exactly what you wrote on here. It's just their protocol. It's as ridiculous as it is. Just abide by it. You can answer.
So, Novak, thank you for the help.
I need to get my second pair of glasses in order
Right
to
ahead.
read.
Go right ahead.
No, because I'm going to put it in good English.
Yeah.
Edit it.
Well, you have to read it as is.
But I need to get my second pair of glasses. In my email, and I have to thank Councillor Fraser for responding back, because the others, he said that he had received it, and therefore I could go ahead with it. Otherwise, I would not be on the list. I was not on the list originally.
That's fine.
And this is what I'm saying. And here is essentially what I would say in my 3 to 7 minute presentation to the city. How can you say that an extra 3,000 signatures don't count when originally only 19,000 something were required? And then I say, why didn't the city say what they defined as, necessary, like 2013? The intent of the people is obvious. And the only reason not to go with it is to try to abort the right of participatory democracy. And the reasons for erasing the signature, on the petition are ridiculous. Such as requiring the year, or they're not able to get in contact with the people by phone. I don't have an answering machine. I am the answering machine you hear her speaking now. So if they tried to reach me, of course they couldn't. I wouldn't be surprised if my signature is one of those that are off the petition. What about cell phone users? There's no reaching them unless you personally know their telephone number. And I noticed that the city probably called during working hours when most people wouldn't be home in the first place. What about unlisted numbers? Do they count? How about the poor unfortunate souls that don't have a phone, only an address? Do they count? Or are they something you want to eliminate? And heaven forbid, if a person is homeless that was to sign, do they not count? They don't have a phone. And then I say, how about any of you who got to be councillors or mayors? I don't remember dating even the day, let alone the month or the 2000 on my ballot, and yet those votes for you guys getting here were all accepted without a date on the ballot. Or, by the way, when you voted for yourself and others, did you put the date, the month, the day, and the year on your ballot? And yet it was counted. Then why is this so necessary unless you're trying to just eliminate legitimate petition signers? Now, if your vote counts without a date, let our petition signatures all count, whether we put the year or not. Guess you know what year we're talking about. And then I sign, with closing, onward, cheering for the right of the petition to stand. Evangeline Gaudron.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there questions of the delegation? Councillor Fraser.
Thank you to you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much, Mrs. Goddard, for your presentation. Same question I've asked. If you could just tell us why you personally signed the petition. Thanks.
Yes, I'd love to have answered this to start with. I think the petition should go ahead. And I also collected petitions, and some people would ask, "Oh, that's only reason the petition's here to prevent or the referendum." I said it'll be a choice, so it might even help promote P3s. It depends on how the majority votes on the referendum.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Other questions? Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery, and we will go to our next stage, which is...
Oh, incidentally, I don't think I used up my 10 minutes.
You actually have. We're finished. Thank you. Yeah, we're finished. Thank you. A break. I'm going to ask we have a 10-minute recess, and we'll convene in just a few moments. I have a motion for that effect, please. Councillor O'Donnell, the seconder. Councillor Flanagan. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll be back in about 10 minutes. Thank you, everyone. This report. Councillor O'Donnell.
Your Worship, wastewater treatment plant petition for referendum 2013. This is an information report, and a report is a receive and file. At this point, I would like to ask Mr. Nicol to make some comments about clarity what's in the report, please.
Mr. Nicol, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, for the benefit of those watching this evening's procedures, I'm going to provide a brief summary of the process and the report. This is not new information for many people here in the gallery tonight, but it is provided for those who are perhaps watching at home or who may be unfamiliar with how this process came about. So just to briefly summarize, based on the 2011 census, a sufficient petition requires 19,310 valid signatures representing the number of electors equal to 10% of the city's population. The petition was delivered to the city clerk on June the 20th of this year, and it was determined to contain 24,361 signatures. In keeping with the validation process prescribed in Section 108 of the Cities Act, the city clerk was first required to exclude the name of any person whose signature was not witnessed, whose printed name was not included or was incorrect, whose street address or legal description of land was not included or was incorrect, or if the date when the person signed the petition was not stated. During this initial counting phase, 4,289 signatures were stricken from the petition as determined by Section 108 of the Act. 435 were removed as the printed surname and given name or initial was incomplete or incorrect. 434 were removed as the street address was incomplete or incorrect. 3,416 were removed as the date was either not completely stated or incorrect, and 4 were removed as they had no witness signature or in fact had witnessed their own signature. There were 20,072 signatures remaining on the petition after this initial counting phase. The City of Regina does not have a voters list. As a consequence, there was a need to verify that signatures were those of eligible electors in Regina. So, following the initial screening, legislation, that being Section 108, subsection 4, provided the city clerk with the authority to use a random statistical sampling method on those remaining signatures with a 95% confidence level to determine the sufficiency of the petition. And to that end, the city clerk, working with the assistance of a professor of statistics from the University of Regina, undertook a random sampling of petitioners. Verification of 1,270 petitioners was initiated. Of these 1,270 petitioners, 262 petitioners were not able to be reached or did not return messages during the 30-day time frame in which the city clerk was required to complete and submit her report to council. These 262 petitioners were not invalidated and they were not disqualified. Instead, they were excluded from the original sample size, but the remaining sample size of 1,008 remained legislatively and statistically appropriate. The survey of those 1,008 petitioners revealed the following. 881 were determined to be valid. 46 had an incomplete or incorrect street address. 25 individuals who were contacted said that they in fact had not signed the petition. 19 people indicated that they had signed the petition more than once. 31 people in total did not meet the requirements of being an elector of the City of Regina. That breakdown is as follows. 10 were not Canadian citizens. 3 were not at least 18 years of age when they signed the petition. 16 people did not reside at the address that they had listed on the petition. 1 person had not been a resident of Regina for 3 consecutive months prior to signing. 1 person had not been a resident of Saskatchewan for 6 consecutive months prior to signing, and 6 individuals refused to verify the information. The random sampling method used, representing a confidence level of 95% and a margin of error of 3%, indicated that the proportion of verified answers was 87.4%. What this means in lay terms is that there is a 95% confidence that the true proportion of verified or valid signatures lays somewhere between 84.4%, representing 16,941 signatures, and 90.4% at the high end, representing 18,145 signatures. Based on these findings, the city clerk determined the petition to be insufficient. With that, the report is now in your hands, and I do invite members of council to seek further information from either the city clerk or the city solicitor.
Your Worship, my intent was to introduce the motion and with the assistance of Mr. Nickel, bring the information forward. As you know, I will have the right to close debate, and I reserve that right. I will sit down at this point.
Councillor Donald, did you in fact move the recommendation?
I did.
Okay. And I'll need a second.
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Second that, good. Councillor Donald, can you please take the chair?
Worship, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Councillor Donald. It's a very emotional-packed, long evening. I want to begin by thanking the administration and the city clerk for the work they've done on the verification of the petition. And I want to thank the delegations and the citizens in the audience for what you've done. Obviously, a very important issue. I don't recall a time I've seen so many people in the gallery at once. I appreciate the person even standing up to listen. I do want to say, though, that the voice of residents has been heard. And I want you to walk away tonight to know that this City Council always listens. We may not always agree on every issue, but this council listens. And your voice has been heard. It was heard prior to tonight. It's been heard over the last several days. I'll speak from my experience and say to you that I have heard and read several emails, letters, I had phone calls, much greater than beyond this room, to speak to people how they felt about this issue. The issue of the petition, the issue of concerns, confusion, of misunderstanding. And we've got the spectrum here we heard tonight, and it's been said outside this room of, I just need to have more information as to what this is all about. I want to understand more. The petition is a tremendous movement of people to say we also have signed for hundreds of reasons. Not just because they don't like the project, they want more information or they want their say. And I think that's a fair and legitimate comment to make on anything. I'll say this, though, that the discussion on this project, this report, this issue has been before council for quite a while. We don't see citizens engaged in every single report that comes to this council. But I want to assure members of the public, as I stand here and as members of council are here, we're here for the right reasons. We are here to build our city. We're here to do the right thing. We've listened to you. We've read the reports. We'll talk about this at some other time, about what this project means. But for tonight, the issue is, don't walk away being negative or feel as though your voice isn't heard. We don't always agree on everything, and no one does. That's not how the world works. That's not how people are. But we listen. Mr. Deputy Mayor, I've said earlier today, and I'm going to put a motion on the floor here, to be very clear and succinct. We have the report from the clerk's office that speaks of the petition being invalid. I am not going to open that up and discuss what's right or wrong, because that is, notwithstanding what someone may feel, that is not the right or the obligation of the City Council. As an officer of the city, the clerk has done her work. But this council has an opportunity to act. We can receive and file this report, and this just goes away, or we can take some steps, and I'm going to recommend some steps. I'm going to put a motion on the floor that the city does have a referendum on the wastewater treatment plant. That's the first motion, Part A.
We need a seconder for that, please.
Second, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hawkins. Microphone, please.
And I'll speak to the second one quickly as well, is that we use the wording of the referendum of what's in the petition. And I'm going to read that for the record. Be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Regina publicly finance, operate, and maintain the new wastewater treatment plant for Regina through a traditional design, bid, build approach.
Can I have a seconder for that, please?
Second that as well, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The floor is yours to speak to the motion.
And I'll just speak to both of them together.
Thank you.
Because they're in fact, inextricably linked. Again, I say we've heard what the citizens have said. The petition is not valid, but the weight of discussion that's happened, irrespective of tonight, and this certainly drives it home, is warrants a discussion to provide information. I think people want to be heard. They want their say. And the last petition we've had that we actually had to vote on is 1991 with store hours. There are others we've had before, and they're referenced by members of the delegation. No question about that. But I do want to say that governing by referendum is difficult. You elect us to make decisions for you, and we try the best we can. And I hope that residents don't think that we have some clandestine issue here of what we do. We do it for the best possible reasons. We're doing it tonight. We understand and have heard. This motion is in response to several people, several thousands of people talking and asking questions, wanting information, and wanting a say. the motion itself stands as obvious, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and I will ask for support of both Part A and B on this motion. Thank you.
Your Worship, I'll handle this from here. I have a speaking order. Councillor Murray first.
Thanks, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and thanks, Your Worship, for bringing forward the motion. As I came here tonight, I want to be clear, I wasn't in favor of a referendum. And my concern was, really, it's about the confusion that was out there. See, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I heard a number of times people were concerned about the water petition. People had signs that said water petition. My father had a lady at 9:30 knock on his door and say, you have to sign my water petition. He said, I think it's about sewer treatment plant. And she said, no, this is a water petition because City Council is going to privatize and sell our water. Those were her words, quote. I appreciate people get zealous and excited and maybe modify things to get more attention. But my dad explained to her that that's not actually correct. And she said, oh yeah, that's correct. I know those city councillors and they told me that they're going to sell our water. Her words, quote, I know those city councillors and they told me they're going to sell our water. So my father again corrected her and said that's actually not the case. This is about sewage. And she got upset. She stormed off. And that was kind of the end of it. But the reason I felt confusion with that was how many other people did she talk to who did believe this was about water? And that was my concern.
Quiet, please. Quiet.
And so how many of those people out there signed the petition thinking this was about selling our water? And again, we know that that's not the case. Today, and over the media, please be respectful, over the media, we know that that's not the case. And that's great, because now I feel a lot more confidence, Mr. Deputy Mayor, because I know that people are going to get the right story. They're going to understand correctly what this is. And that's why it's so important. We're going to have that clarity. It's going to give the citizens of Regina the opportunity to make a decision. $58 million is a really large reason for them to have the opportunity to make that decision. So I think it's important that we have an opportunity for the citizens to gain information, as we have. I've attended, and I know, Mr. Deputy Mayor, you did as well, presentations put on by CUPE, Paul Moist and John Luxley, Saskatoon a year ago, and in Vancouver most recently during the FCM. Again, because for me, I represent everyone, the whole city. Not just my ward, but the whole city. And I want to know all of the pieces and parts. So I would suggest that I probably have had the opportunity to learn more and see more than the average person has. Gives me a little bit better ability to make a decision, and I know my council colleagues have done the same. Our intention is here to make the best decision possible for the community. But I will stand behind the community if they're asked to make that same decision. So, Your Worship, to your motion, I am in favor as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hawkins, please.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. My first words tonight are for the City Clerk. The City Clerk has had to sit patiently and listen to a number of allegations made, allegations that she deliberately misread the intentions of the City of Regina, that she acted anti-democratically, that she was biased, that she lacked independence. I want to say to the City Clerk, as clearly and as profoundly as I can say to her, that I believe she acted with the highest level of integrity in discharging her legal obligation to the citizens of Regina, and I salute her for that. I also salute her staff, who put in many, many, many hours on a very difficult assignment and discharged it admirably. One doesn't have to agree or disagree with her eventual conclusion, although I agree with it. One doesn't have to agree or disagree to know that she and her staff acted with professionalism, with knowledge, with dedication, with integrity, in a spirit of service to our city. And for that, I salute her. I'm confident the whole of the council salutes her. And I say to you, Madam Clerk, that I am confident that the residents of my ward, Ward 2, and indeed I am confident that the citizens of Regina appreciate what you have done under very difficult circumstances and your grace and dignity tonight. Thank you, Madam Clerk. I want to say something to my fellow councillors, because the word democratic has been used and sometimes used loosely tonight. Each member of this council 10 months ago had the courage to put forward their name before the electorate of this city and fight an election campaign. That is an act of profound faith in democracy. My fellow councillor citizens had confidence in them and voted for them. I have watched, as a new councillor, how hard these people work. I have watched the knowledge they bring to their job and the skill and passion they bring to discharging their obligation to the city. I am proud to serve with such strong Democrats. Let me say just three brief things about the substance of the Mayor's motion for a referendum and the question, which I support. First of all, I think that this acknowledges that our citizens have said to us they would like to have further involvement in this process. I think that they deserve that. I also think that we need to clear the air. And there is nothing better to clear the air than a vote, and that's one reason why I support the Mayor's motion for a referendum. The second reason I support the Mayor's motion for a referendum is because it gives the Council, a Council which unanimously supported, after careful consideration, this P3 proposal. It gives all of us on Council a chance to explain in detail to our fellow citizens why we did that. It wasn't done carelessly. It wasn't done for frivolous reasons or unfair reasons or corrupt reasons. It was done for very good reasons, and now we are going to have a chance to explain that. We are going to have a chance to explain how the P3 project will help us spread the $224 million risk of this plant. We're going to have a chance to explain how this method is the most innovative method and will give us the cleanest and best system for clearing our waste sewage. It will give us a chance to explain how this process will protect the collective agreement and the jobs of all of our wastewater workers. It will give us a chance to explain how their collective bargaining rights will be preserved under successor legislation, and I go further. It will create new and interesting and technologically sophisticated jobs for the workers in our wastewater treatment area. We will now have a chance to explain that to the citizens of Regina, and I'm looking forward to taking that opportunity. I also want to say, thirdly, that the citizens of Regina need to know, deserve an explanation of how there is $58.5 million on the line in this referendum. No one should kid themselves here. If we vote to deny that $58.5 million, to refuse the grant, that will mean a very substantial increase in our utility bills in the order of $20 a month for the next 4 years, or will mean increased taxation, or will mean both, or will mean that the citizens of Regina will not have, the council will not have the resources to look after things like roads and snow removal and parks. And all of these things which are important to our citizens. I'm looking forward to explaining to the citizens of Regina exactly why we voted for the P3 project and exactly why we felt that the citizens would want us to accept the $58.5 million. I support this motion with pride because it involves the democratic process and the citizens in this decision, and I am very confident that the referendum will approve the Council's decision and go forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Are there any other speakers on this? Councillor Fraser.
Much through Mr. Chair. I'd first like to say thanks to everyone who came out tonight. This is a lot of people hours being spent on this important issue. So here are the few of the things that I heard tonight, some of the presenters' concerns. Concern about privatizing public goods, concern about the cost of this project, concern about control over this project, feeling like there was just not enough information, concerns over ownership of public goods, the principles of democracy, transparency, and I think the common theme throughout is just that people want to have a say in big decisions like this. Those, I think, are all reasonable concerns. A few things I'd like to say that this referendum, I mean, supposing that this referendum goes forward after a vote here soon, three things that the referendum's not about, actually. To be clear, this referendum is not about building a wastewater treatment plant. We actually have to build one. The federal regulations have changed, and no matter what, we do have to build a new plant. Number two, the plant, as Mr. Holmes pointed out, the plant will be built privately. We actually don't build that sort of infrastructure, so no matter what option comes out on the other end, it will be built privately. And this one, now you might get ready to boo or to hiss or something like that. You might not like this one. I actually don't think that this referendum is about how the infrastructure will actually be owned. The city will actually own the actual physical plant, which could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. Ask Hamilton example that went horribly off the rails, and the city, of course, was still stuck with the infrastructure. So what this is about, I think, is three things. This is about how the program will be financed, how it's going to be operated, if it's public or private. I think the question reflects that. And also, this is a question of federal subsidy. This was not a question I took lightly, and I don't imagine other councillors did either. P3s, I don't necessarily agree are the right direction for our country, but I do think this council, like all councils across Canada right now, are stuck with a tough choice, and that is growing infrastructure debts, growing cash debts, and only one pot of federal money on the table, and that is a very prescriptive way to do this as a P3. In this case, this represents about 58, as Councillor Hawkins mentioned, $58.5 million. So, like it or not, we just need to appreciate that that's definitely voting on this in the first place as a councillor. That was a key part of my vote, and I presume as we get deeper into this for now that you guys will likely get a chance to vote on one of these issues, that'll no doubt be a consideration for people too. One more thought on that I feel a lot of the legitimate concerns around P3 would still be concerns if the federal government were to pay for 100% of this project. In this case, they're willing to pay for 25%. It's with some irony that one of the companies that is likely to apply, or they apply on this sort of thing across Canada, is EPCOR. In essence, a crown corp of the city of Edmonton that returns a lot of money to the city, $180 million they returned to the city of Edmonton last year in profit. If the feds were more free with this money, I think it might be an option that Regina would look to create our own utility, our own crown corp that could actually go and help to close that infrastructure gap. That's not the case, unfortunately, in these circumstances. So, in closing, I've looked to support the mayor's recommendations, and just to say, it's kind of exciting, isn't it? Referendum. Wow. Thanks.
Councillor Young, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to thank all the people that called me and emailed me. I'm still trying to answer all of them, but I really appreciated that. And what I really appreciated were the conversations I had with some of you who, when we talked about the issue, we talked about feelings, and we listened to one another. And so I hope that that is something that we can look forward to as we go into a referendum. I heard two really important things this evening. The first one was how important it is to all people to be able to exercise their democratic right to vote and to have a say. And the second thing I heard was that people are really interested in information, that you want to know more. You want to be able to ask those hard questions, and you want to be able to have answers for them. And so I think that the referendum will give us an opportunity to do both of those. There's something that I read in the Globe and Mail last week. Some of you may have read it. It was called, it was about civil discourse. And it's what separates democracy in this country and other countries like ours from countries who fight to make decisions and use guns to make decisions. And a civil discourse sets us apart because we try to understand both sides of the issue. Even if we disagree and we feel strongly about what we think, we still listen to understand, and then in the end you make an informed decision. And I look forward to having a civil discourse during this referendum, and I look forward as a councillor to talking to the people in my ward and other people who may call, so that we can listen and hear what each other has to say and do that in a respectful way. So I look forward to the referendum.
Thank you. Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Chair, and through you, that I too support the concept of a referendum, and I think I'd like to echo many of the comments made by my colleagues in terms of the issues around democracy, confusion, hope for the involvement. But I did actually come to my conclusion, probably for maybe some other reasons too, and I think they were mentioned in sort of our first presentation, and I think that we have made the right decision. I know council, we've spent probably 40, 50 hours in meetings with consultants, learning and understanding the differences between the different models. So personally, I'm very comfortable in our decision. However, based on the feedback tonight, there's been a lot of confusion. I guess my one concern in the process, which I'm learning as a new councillor, is that this item, from what I've been informed, kind of came into the public domain about 4 years ago and has been out there. And to me, I think it moved along, and now all of a sudden the project materialized, was approved by council, and has kind of left the train station. And I guess when I look back at one of the key issues that I was elected on was for the taxpayers to watch the tax dollars and keep them as minimal as possible. And one of the issues I didn't hear a lot of during the emails I received, the phone calls, was some of the attention to the financial ramifications of bringing the issue to the forefront now. That some of the issues I worry about is that there is the additional cost of the referendum. There's probably with the money that's been spent lately on advertising, the clerk staff time, the money used to, please bear with me. And then there's the bigger cost for the projects that anybody that's been involved in construction knows there's inflationary costs of about $1 million a month that these projects incur while they're being delayed. There's the issue of the $58.2 million that the federal government is kind of waving over the municipalities' head that, yeah, they meet the criteria or you lose it. So that's a big risk now that's at play, because I don't know how long we can let that carry on, and the impact if we did have that taken away, the future ones. There are contractors that are currently lining up their own schedules, looking at wanting to participate in this. They'll have other projects that they may have to walk away from, which creates more. There's the issue of the penalties that we may incur if we don't meet our deadline. So I just want to make that as a point that it is a concern, because I do watch the dollars, and I think the taxpayers are worried about the cost. But I do, like I say, and I came to the conclusion that probably a referendum was probably the quickest, fastest way to get this project back on track. And so because of that, I'm fully supportive of the mayor's recommendation. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers? So, Your Worship, before I can do too much, I have to withdraw. I would like the opportunity to speak. So I'll take the microphone now, and during that time I will remove the original motion and seek for my seconder to do so, and then you'll have the last say before your amendment.
Councillor O'Donnell to the amendment.
Thank you. So just so that you understand, what happened was because there's an amendment on the floor, the original motion would have to be withdrawn, and I will do that if I could, and if I could get my seconder to agree on that, he did. So I'll remove that, and we'll speak to the notion of the referendum and so on. I believe that my colleagues have spoken probably no different than what I feel, and I want to just relay a couple of thoughts, though, that are separate from the notion of a referendum. On the weekend, no different than anybody else, I spoke to a number of people. I want to emphasize that I spoke to some very thoughtful people, including people who organized the petition, who collected signatures and so on, in a very rational, calm, and I'll call it respectful manner. We had a discussion, and I was, I hope I always am, but I'm certainly open to their thoughts. And so that was an effective weekend and gave me much time for pause. There's a couple of things that happened here tonight that I want to comment on. One is that from what I can tell, no one was denied the microphone. No one was told that they couldn't say something. Not one, by the way. And I think it ended up at 22 or 23, whatever the number was. But during that discourse, there were some things that happened that I think are absolutely, totally inappropriate. It is not the time or the place to come and go after staff. If you have an issue with our staff, there are many ways that we can handle that. Not the time, not the place, and inappropriate. The second one is many, many times people were asked, please just hold your applause, or please just relax, please don't comment. At no time did I see the colleagues around here comment about anything you said, but I did note that all of them listened. And by the note of what is the discussion here, it is proof that they listened. So if we're going to go into a referendum, if we're going to go into things, can we at least be respectful of one another's view? And can we at least be respectful of the fact that we may or may not agree? We are at the right place with this. We should have a public discourse on this in a respectful, democratic manner. I will support the motion.
Thank you for that. Okay, thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. There's no other speakers on the motion before us. I just want to say ask for the tolerance of council to speak from this position for just one moment. Are we okay with that? In all my time on council, and I've been councillor for 15 years, the longest around the table, and I'm very proud of that. It's rare to see this many people come out and speak, and it's a good thing, actually. I'm pleased about this. This is very good. I'm also very happy about the emotion that's here. If it's directed in a positive way, even more so, I become very enthusiastic about that. But I wanted to say, and I hope that this doesn't come across as being unfair to anyone, but this council represents everyone. This motion that's been put forward that we'll vote on in a moment represents the view that took place on everybody that we heard from. And I can tell you what I heard over the many weeks and days. I can recount most of those conversations. What I said, I asked a question and listened. And it's important you understand that. The council is listening. This is a change of direction that you thought before you came in this room. Because council listens and takes into view everyone's perspective. One final note. I echo Councillor O'Donnell's comments about staff. There's no other questions on this, no other speakers. I'm going to call the question on the report. All those in favor? Opposed? That is unanimous. There's no other business, so I can ask for a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved, Your Worship.
Seconder, please. Councillor Hinks. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The business of this meeting is now finished. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a good evening.